seen the tragic results of that. Now, that Afghan, that attacker, that terrorist, is just one of 88,000. We've identified 2,000 of that group of 88,000 who have ties to terrorist organizations. We're working right now, hand in hand with DHS and with the FBI, to run down this 2,000, the Afghans who came here under Allies Welcome, who have ties to terrorist organizations, and additionally, the other 16,000 individuals with ties to terrorist organizations that Biden let into our country. That is probably the top terrorist threat that we face right now, and that doesn't include the individuals who came here illegally through the open border. That number, alarmingly, remains unknown at this time. We're trying to figure out who those individuals are as well. Also, adding to this elevated threat, we have ISIS and Al-Qaeda that have found sanctuary in places like Afghanistan and Syria due to the transitional nature of those governments, and also, again, in Iraq and some of the hinterlands of Iraq. And these terrorists are able to communicate and spread their propaganda and a lot of their know-how thanks to the proliferation of encrypted apps and also due to just the internet writ large. The new terrorist tactic that we're seeing more and more is moving away from very deliberate cellular attacks that we can infiltrate easily while they communicate into an inspirational methodology where you have key members putting out media and putting out how-to guides to reach out and to touch individuals inside the United States. We recently disrupted one of those attacks just before Halloween, thanks to the work of the FBI with support from really the entire U.S. intelligence community and the Joint Terrorism Task Force model in Michigan. That plot touched multiple states and had ties to ISIS inside Iraq and Syria. Another issue that we are addressing right now, thanks to the decisive leadership of President Trump, is the scourge of fentanyl, gang, and cartel violence. Under President Trump's leadership, we've designated these cartels and gangs as terrorist organizations, and we've done that rightfully so. These individuals, these terrorists, have killed hundreds of thousands of Americans, as these angel families will tell you firsthand. What President Trump has done by designating them as terrorists has allowed us to turn the tools of the intelligence community against them and predominantly watch list them as terrorists to prevent them from ever coming into America in the first place. To date, we've added about 35,000 of these narco-terrorists to our terrorist watch list, and we've stopped just around 6,000 of these terrorists from ever entering our country, from setting foot inside of America, so they can no longer kill Americans with impunity. These are just some of the issues that we're covering 24/7, 365 at the National Counterterrorism Center, and I look forward to discussing more with you all today. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Kent. I now recognize Director Glasheen for 5 minutes to summarize his opening statement.
Good morning, Chairman Garbarino, Ranking Member Thompson, and members of the committee. I'm Operations Director Michael Glasheen. I oversee the FBI's National Security Divisions. I am honored to be here with you, representing the people of the United States, the FBI, who tackle the complex and grave threats we face with perseverance, professionalism, and integrity. Our nation faces serious and evolving threats ranging from international terrorists to hostile foreign intelligence operatives, from sophisticated cyber attacks to internet-facilitated sexual exploitation of children, from violent gangs and criminal organizations to public corruption and corporate fraud. Keeping pace with these threats is a significant challenge. Our adversaries take advantage of the internet, social media, and emerging technologies like artificial intelligence to influence the American people, facilitate illegal activities, and recruit followers. Even as 2026 marks the 25th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, terrorism remains a persistent but evolving threat. Over the past several years, the FBI has identified a particularly concerning uptick in the radicalization of young people. Radicalization of domestic terrorists most often occurs online. Social media and encryption have increased the speed and accessibility of the violent extremist content. International terrorists continue to pose one of the greatest, most immediate threats to the homeland. Some international terrorists and people located and radicalized to violence primarily inside the United States who are not receiving individualized direction from foreign terrorist organizations or FTOs, but are inspired to commit violence by FTOs such as ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Iran continues to plot attacks against former government officials in retaliation for the January 2020 death of Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC, Commander Qasem Soleimani. Iran also continues to provide support to its proxies and terrorist organizations throughout the world, such as Lebanese Hezbollah. China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and criminal ransomware continue to be the top cyber threats facing the United States. And there's no clear line where cyber criminal activity ends and nation-state activity begins. Critical infrastructure remains a highly attractive target for cyber criminals and nation-state actors due to the potential to cause widespread disruption, financial damage, and risk to our national security. The United States faces foreign intelligence threats as nations such as the People's Republic of China, Russia, and Iran become more aggressive and capable than ever. The PRC has deliberately created an environment that abuses global interconnectedness and encourages intellectual property acquisition using human intelligence officers, corrupt corporate insiders, foreign direct investment, and cyber intrusions. Russia continues to seek and acquire U.S. technologies to help rebuild its defense industrial base, relying on complex procurement networks to evade U.S. export controls and sanctions. The United States faces many criminal threats, including violent crime, financial and healthcare fraud, transnational and regional organized criminal enterprises, crimes against children, and human trafficking, violent threats against public election officials, personnel, and public corruption. Currently, the FBI-led task forces are staffed with over 9,000 federal, state, local, tribal, and territorial partners. Many of these task forces are focused on cartels, violent crime, drug trafficking, child exploitation, and human trafficking across our nation's communities. The FBI has and continues to establish strong capabilities to assess the threats, share intelligence, and leverage key technologies. We recruit the best to serve as special agents, intelligence analysts, and professional staff. Our leadership team views change and transformation as a positive tool for keeping the FBI focused on the gravest threats facing our nation. Over the past few months, we started the process to relocate hundreds of positions from the National Capital Region out to field offices across the country. This enhancement to field resources increases our investigative capacity across our 56 field offices and enhances the FBI's commitment to addressing violent crime, gangs, drugs, counterintelligence, and terrorism threats. Our fellow citizens look to us to protect the homeland from these threats. And every day, the men and women of the FBI continue to meet and exceed these expectations. I'm proud to represent them in testimony today, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you, Director Glasheen. My understanding is a witness may have to leave early today. While I want to be clear, the committee did not agree to a hard stop. All witnesses are here voluntarily and are free to go. If a witness does leave, the hearing will continue with the remaining witnesses. Members will be recognized by order of seniority for their 5 minutes of question. We want to get through as many members as possible, so even though I have been lenient before with the 5 minutes, I'm directing members and witnesses that we're going to strictly enforce the 5-minute rule today. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questions. Secretary Noem, I appreciate you being here today, and you've been on the job less than a year, and this is the second time appearing before the committee, which I think is the norm, and I do really appreciate you being here. And I know you have a very important job to do. You oversee a lot of different sub-agencies, so I know you can't always be here in person. And with that, as a committee, we still want to work with the administration and conduct our oversight. So I'm asking you if you can commit to making sure that in the future, if we want to have a hearing, you'll be able to supply maybe a deputy secretary or somebody to come to specifically talk about that.
Yes,
Issues we want to talk about.
yes, Mr. Chairman.
I really appreciate that communication, and I think collaboration between the administration and Congress is key. Secretary Noem, I also wanted to ask you, in September, the department under FEMA proposed new allocations for counterterrorism grant funding, which cut dollars to New York by 80% because of a new formula. Considering New York is consistently a top terror target, this was surprising. We're grateful President Trump restored this grant funding, and pursuant to the present direction, has the department increased the allocation to New York?
Yes, President Trump did. I would say that when we look at the Homeland Security grants and how they're allocated, the formula focuses on where we see the threats today and where those communities are that need the resources. I would also inform the committee and you, Mr. Chairman, that New York City at the time of the allocation still had over $440 million in reserve that was available to them to utilize. So the intention of these grants is that communities and cities would use the dollars to build up the security measures that they need to do for a long-term impact, and that the same amount of dollars aren't necessary every single year. You need to meet the threats where they are in the country at the time the grant dollars are available. So thank you to all of you for your work on getting us dollars that we can give to grants to help secure our local communities and states. But when we're looking at cities that have hundreds of millions of dollars in reserves, we recognize that giving them hundreds of dollars of millions more may not be appropriate considering all of the threats that we have. But President Trump has sent more resources to New York City. We'll continue to meet the threats head on because that is our mission, is to make sure that we're looking at every single threat that we have. The formula that we have considered and have put in place recognizes what came over the border, where we see the infiltration going, which communities are impacted, and what we need to do to harden our systems.
I appreciate that, Secretary, and I appreciate the work you're doing with the President. I appreciate his decision to send that increased money to New York. I have a question. Since this is about worldwide threats, can you discuss what DHS's most significant concerns are today for the country?
I would say, Mr. Chairman, what keeps me up at night is that we don't necessarily know all of the people that are in this country, who they are and what their intentions are. We think up to 15 to 20 million people came in under the Biden administration on the invasion over the southern border. They were not vetted. They were allowed to pour in. Our parole programs, our asylum programs, our visa programs were all exploited, and the integrity was demolished under Joe Biden and the leadership at the Department of Homeland Security. And frankly, the entire department was neglected. In fact, I believe the Secretary was told at times not to do certain things by the Biden administration to facilitate this invasion. So what keeps me up at night is the individuals that are in this country that wish to do us harm. And that is why we are so aggressive at making sure that we're going out and doing investigative work, finding those violent criminals, finding those people who shouldn't be in this country to begin with, and those that want to go after and to harm our American citizens.
Thank you, Secretary. Director Kushine, as you heard and as you said, during the next few years, the United States will host more major events than ever before. This brings up obvious security concerns, including counter drones, which we just passed some new authorities in the NDA yesterday. How is the FBI preparing for counter drone threats during mass gathering events?
Chairman, thank you for that question. Counter UAS, the passage of the legislation yesterday is a game changer for us. How we're preparing for that going forward, we just stood up a counter UAS school down at Huntsville, Alabama, where we will train federal officials, state locals, as well to assist with that preparation and implementation of using counter UAS technology. Prior to this passage, it was only the FBI and or DHS that could provide that assistance. Now that this passage of authority, it will allow us to have a greater handling of the threat to a mass event.
Thank you very much. I yield back. I now recognize the ranking member for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gladstein, will you tell me the organizations that pose on the domestic side, two of the organizations, number one, number two, threat to the homeland at this point?
Can you please clarify, like organizations?
Any domestic terrorist organization that poses a threat to the homeland as we speak?
I'd say the first one, President Trump had just announced Executive Order Domestic Terrorist Organization, Antifa. That's our primary concern right now.
All right, that's what President Trump did. What does the FBI say?
We share the same view. When you look at the data right now, you look at the domestic terrorist threat that we're facing, right now, what I see from my position is that's the most immediate violent threat that we're facing on the domestic side.
So where is Antifa headquartered?
What we're doing right now with the organization,
Where in the United States does Antifa exist? If it's a terrorist organization, and you've identified it as number one.
we are building out the infrastructure right now.
So what does that mean? We trying to get the information. You say Antifa is a terrorist organization. Tell us as a committee, how did you come to that? Where do they exist? How many members do they have in the United States as of right now?
Well, that's very fluid. It's ongoing for us to understand that. The same, no different than Al-Qaeda and ISIS.
No, I don't want you, I'll ask one question, sir. I just want you to tell us. If you said Antifa is the number one domestic terrorist organization operating in the United States, I just need to know where they are, how many people. I don't want a name, I don't want anything like that. Just how many people have you identified with the FBI that Antifa is made of?
Well, the investigations are active.
Sir, you wouldn't come to this committee and say something you can't prove, I know. I know you wouldn't do that. But you did. Madam Secretary, you and the gentleman from NCTC reference the unfortunate accident that occurred with the National Guardsman being killed.
You think that was an unfortunate accident?
I mean,
It was a terrorist attack.
wait. Look, I'll get it straight. Then you can
He shot our
respond.
National Guardsman in the head.
Look, Mr. Chairman, will you direct the witness to allow me to ask my question? It was an unfortunate situation, but you blamed it solely on Joe Biden. I want you to know who approved the asylum application for this same person.
Mr. Thompson, this individual that came into the country.
No, I want to know who approved.
Congressman Thompson, I want you to understand.
no.
When this individual came into the country, he
I'm not
came
gonna let you-
under
I'm not gonna let
an
you-
evacuation of Afghanistan under Operation Allies Welcome, was thoroughly vetted by the Biden administration at that point in time, allowed into our country, and then was never followed up. I want to remind
Reclaim
everybody
my
in
time.
Congress.
Reclaim my time.
We follow the law, and every asylum is supposed to have a check-in every single year, and the Biden administration failed to do that. They vetted this individual, allowed them into our country, and did not do due diligence.
Witness will allow the gentleman to ask his question.
Yes or no? Who approved the asylum claim?
The application on the asylum was thoroughly filled out by information that was gathered by the Biden administration.
So the
His
Biden
asylum-
administration approved the asylum.
His asylum application was put into place under the rules established by the Biden administration.
Reclaiming my time. I don't want to file perjury charges against you, but I'm of the opinion that the Trump administration, DHS, your DHS, approved the asylum application.
The asylum application moved forward under all of the information and vetting processes that were put in place under the Biden administration, which is when vetting happened. And that's what President Trump has changed. Under President Trump's administration.
Reclaim my time again.
When
It's obvious you don't want to answer the question. Mr. Kent, do you want a shot at it?
The individual was vetted to serve as a soldier in Afghanistan, and that vetting standard was used by the Biden administration as a ruse to bring him here. Had we followed the standard operating procedures for special immigrant visas,
Reclaim my time.
that individual and none of the Allies Welcome people would have come to America. That's on Joe Biden.
Gentleman's
just
time has
answer the-
expired.
That was the answer.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. That was a murder that took place in D.C. It was not an unfortunate incident. And those comments are effing disrespectful.
Who is that?
Gentlemen,
Expect better from the
It's not a valid point of order. I will now recognize the gentleman from Texas, the former chairman, Mr. McCall, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, great to see you. This hearing reminds me of the novel A Tale of Two Cities. They see it, the Dems see it as the worst of times, but I see it really as the best of times. And what do I mean by that? Under the Biden administration, 15 to 20 million illegal aliens, unvetted, as you indicated, came into this country. What I think most disturbing is Director Kent's testimony 18,000 known or suspected terrorists got into this country under the Biden administration. That's why we impeached Mayorkas. I was one of the managers. He told his Border Patrol, you don't have to pay attention to federal law when it says shall detain aggravated felons. He disregarded federal law and says, you know what, may detain. It's discretionary. And guess what? We have thousands of aggravated felons now, or if not millions, in this country today. That was the worst of times. Let me go to the best of times. Most secure border I've seen in my 22 years in Congress. And I've dealt with this for a long time. Coming from Texas, being chairman of this committee, the daily crossings are 95% down from the prior administration. That's the best of times. Zero catch and release. My very first bill in Congress 22 years ago was to end catch and release. 22 years later, we finally have achieved that goal. That, Madam Secretary, is the best of times, an all-time record low. America is safer today. I feel so. And when I look at the Venezuelan vessels attacked, the president had every right under the Constitution, Article 2, international waters, cartels designated as FTOs, coming into our country to spread poison to kill Americans. If that's not self-defense, I don't know what it is. And then finally, Madam Secretary, thank you for taking out the shadow Iranian oil tankers headed from Venezuela to Cuba, getting around our sanctions that Congress passed. I'm finally seeing an administration flexing its muscle in this hemisphere, which has been neglected for so many years. So air, land, and sea is your charge. It's the military's charge as well. I see the land secure. I see the maritime borders getting more secure, and I applaud you for that. On the air secure piece, I chair the Special Events Task Force. That's FIFA, the Olympics, the 250th anniversary. Drones are the biggest threat as I see it. I see it in Ukraine in its conflict with Russia, and I see it across our border, and I see it at these events. If you could update me, and with the new NDA authorization to allow federal, state, and locals to work together to identify hostile adversary drones and take them down, can you tell me how that will impact your ability, Madam Secretary, to better secure these special events?
Yes, thank you, Congressman McCall, and thank you for your leadership. I understand you're retiring, and I'm sad about that. You've been a statesman. Thank you for serving with such dignity.
Thank you.
The counter-drone and drone technology that is out there today, frankly, our authorities haven't kept up with. And so thank you for that legislation. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to truly defend the homeland. Here at the Department of Homeland Security, we are going to be investing upwards to $1.5 billion into drone technology and counter-drone technology and mitigation measures that we can deploy not just across different NSC events or large-scale events that we're responsible for the security on, but also that we can use to partner with cities and states for celebrations and different things that they may hold as well. So we have the responsibility at the Department of Homeland Security for FIFA and the 11 cities that will be hosting the matches here in the United States, also the Olympics, the America 250 celebrations, also other national security events that happen, such as Mardi Gras and other events that are going on throughout the country. So this program that we will have will not only work within the events that the department is responsible for, but we will be able to sign agreements with states and cities to provide measures that they don't currently have. And we're working with the FAA as well to get what we need to be able to operate. And we don't want just to detect, we don't want to just monitor, we need to mitigate. We need to take these drones down. We need to.
If I could add, my time's going to expire. There is so much technology out there today, counter-drone technology, that I've been working to get into Ukraine to protect them from Russian drones that we can deploy at these events. I'd love to visit with you on that at a later date. And thank you for your service.
Yeah, thank you.
Gentleman's time's expired. I now recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Correa, for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I agree with my colleague from Texas. It is a tale of two cities. Secretary Noem, Trump administration, you're going after the worst of the worst criminals, and we agree with you. The problem is 70% of the people you've arrested have no criminal record. You're going after non-criminal immigrants, U.S. citizens, and permanent legal residents. Donna Hughes Brown, Irish citizen, green card holder, 48 years in the United States. She also happens to be the mother of a U.S. Marine, sister to a retired Army colonel. She's in ICE detention since July. She tried to come back from Ireland, arrested, has been there since then. Her crime? She wrote 2 bad checks for less than $80 a decade ago. You arrested her, she's in custody. Her husband, Jim Brown, came to us and told us her story. Jim told us, I voted for President Trump because he promised to go after criminals in our community and not people like my wife. If I can, I'd like to play a video for you. Then he also voted for President Trump.
Yes, sir,
Why did you vote for him?
because I was an idiot. 80% of the evangelical Christian people were lied to, if you really want to know the truth, and that's exactly what happened. They said criminal, and I believe criminals need to be off the street.
I just want to make sure people watching this understand who you are.
My wife and I, when we don't work, we're ministers. We help the needy. That's what we do. And that's who they're arresting. It's
Now, we've got Mr. Jim Brown before you. He's standing up. Hopefully you can talk to him a little bit. These people, Donna Hughes Brown, are not the individuals that should be deported. Another case, Narciso Barranco was beaten and arrested by masked agents while working as a landscaper. He's an undocumented immigrant, 30 years in this country, not a traffic ticket. Mr. Barranco is also the father of 3 U.S. Marines. 3 Marines. You want to make a movie of people like this. A man who comes to this country, instills patriotism in his kids. They swear an oath to serve and possibly give up their life for this country. We'll play a video on this as well, please.
Masked federal agents were filmed pinning a man to the ground and repeatedly striking him in the head and neck before putting him in an unmarked car. The man in the video has been identified as Narciso Barranco and is the father of 2 active duty Marines and 1 Marine veteran. The Department of Homeland Security said an illegal alien was arrested by Border Patrol agents after he, quote, assaulted federal law enforcement, adding that Barranco, quote, swung a weed whacker directly at an agent's face. Video shared by DHS and reviewed by CNN shows Barranco running with a weed whacker, but does not show him striking officers.
I also have with us today Alex Barranco behind you, a retired Marine. That's his father. And Alex, on behalf of myself, members here, I want to thank you for your service to our country, and we also thank your brothers for serving our great country. Thank you very much. Got another case. George Rete, 25-year-old, native of California, my home state. He's a U.S. citizen, Army veteran who served in Iraq. Well, on his way to work, he came to an immigration checkpoint. Pulled over. I don't know where officers deployed tear gas on him, broke his car window, pepper sprayed him, and dragged him out of his car. An American citizen held for 72 hours without any charges, wasn't even given the opportunity to shower, to wash off that paper
Gentleman's
spray.
time's expired. I now recognize the gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Guest. for
Mr.
5
Chairman, I
minutes.
have 2 articles I'd like to present for the record.
Unanimous consent.
Under President Trump, an agency intended to keep Americans safe has diverted resources from child abuse, trafficking, and terrorism to immigration enforcement. Second is this letter from my Orange County Sheriff, Don Barnes, essentially talking about all the individuals under Prop 50 referred to ICE 2025 year to date. 50 of them.
Without objection.
ICE never showed up to pick them up.
Without
Mr.
objection.
Chairman?
I will
Mr. Chairman?
entertain,
Mr.
I will entertain UCs at the end of the hearing. I want to entertain all UC motions at the end of the hearing. We have witnesses. I want to make sure everybody has time. So if we do this now, we do have a witness has to leave. You're just going to be taking time from other members. But I will entertain UC motions at the end of this hearing. I now recognize the gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Guess, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, it's great to see you again. Thanks for appearing before us again. I want to echo some of the remarks of Mr. McCall. I want to first thank you. I want to thank the men and women who serve under your command for the incredible job that you have done over the last 12 months. We have seen that you are active in enforcing the rule of law. We have seen a border that is as secure in our lifetime as we have ever seen. You mentioned in your opening statement, over the last 4 years, we saw somewhere between 15 to 20 million illegal immigrants enter the country. Just looking at monthly statistical data, we know that under the Biden-Harris administration, that in December of 2024, that there were over 300,000 illegal immigrants who were encountered along the southern border in that month alone. Recent statistics by the Department of Homeland Security for October, the most recent statistics we have, show that the number of border encounters for October of this year under your leadership have dropped to 11,000, a decrease of over 95%. And so I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for the work that your men and women have done to protect our borders from illegal narcotics entering the country. We saw a press release the Coast Guard sent out this week regarding Operation Pacific Viper. And they mentioned a specific seizure that occurred on December the 2nd by the Coast Guard cutter Monroe, in which in a single incident of interdiction that the Coast Guard had the largest maritime interdiction seizure in almost 20 years, seizing 20,000 pounds of cocaine in an individual seizure. So I thank you for your aggressive actions in enforcing the law and for the incredible work that you and the men and women under your command are doing. I want to talk about, as we talk about threats, I want to talk about threats against law enforcement. Last week, this committee, we had a hearing. The hearing was entitled When Badges Become Targets. And during that hearing, we talked about the threats to law enforcement, specifically federal law enforcement. And even specifically within federal law enforcement, the threats toward ICE agents, the threats toward you and other members of leadership within DHS. We know that those threats and those incidents of physical attack have escalated dramatically, in some cases over 1,000%. And part of the driving force, I believe, behind those threats is what I refer to as rhetoric against law enforcement. And I brought this up last week, and I want to bring this up again with you and give you a chance to briefly address this. These are just roughly 10 of the statements that I was able to easily find online by elected officials, governors, mayors, in many cases members of Congress, where they were spewing what I believe to be very harmful statements toward law enforcement. Governor Pritzker claimed that ICE is grabbing people off the street and disappearing them, that our country is becoming Nazi Germany. Representative Crockett compared ICE to slave patrols. Representative Garcia referred to ICE as thugs. Representative Ramirez attacked ICE as a terror force, later a terrorist organization, and then later in the hearing said, let me be clear, the Department of Homeland Security, you can quote me on that, is the single biggest threat to public safety right now. Representative Tlaib said ICE is terrorizing our community, turning our country into a fascist police state. Representative Jayapal called ICE agents deranged and said it's inspiring to obstruct immigration enforcement. Governor Walz smeared ICE agents as modern-day Gestapo. Chicago Mayor Johnson accused ICE of being secret police and terrorizing our community. Representative Lynch referred to ICE agents as the Gestapo and nondescript thugs, and Representative Frost compared ICE operations to some of the worst horrors and crimes against humanity in history. And so, Secretary Noem, I'd like to give you a few moments to, one, address these statements, and to speak to how these statements place the safety of our men and women of law enforcement at risk.
Thank you, Congressman Guest. I appreciate you giving me the chance to talk about this, because I think the words that these elected officials have used to describe our law enforcement officers are horrific, shocking, and unacceptable. Every single American citizen should find the words that they have used to describe these men and women that took an oath to keep us safe unacceptable, and needs to be pointed out that we are seeing the consequences of those words every single day by the violent attacks. 1,000% increase in
Gentleman's
violent
time's
attacks,
expired.
8,000% in death threats.
Gentleman's
It's
time is
unacceptable.
gentleman's time expired. I now recognize the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Tanadar, for 5 minutes of questions. Please remember to stick to the 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Garbarino and Ranking Member Thompson, for having this hearing today. I know the American people have been demanding answers from this administration on their unlawful actions, so I hope we are able to get some useful answers from our witnesses today. Secretary Noem, this past May, I asked you during a congressional hearing if it was the policy of DHS to follow orders issued by federal courts. You said on the record, and I'm quoting here, "We are following all federal orders." End of my quote, end of your quote. Secretary Noem, you lied to me under oath that day. You lied to the American people, and you have betrayed the trust placed upon you in your role as Secretary of Homeland Security. You defied federal court orders when you refused to order the deportation flights to El Salvador in March to turn around. Federal courts have also found your department to have violated federal injunctions in your continue to send non-citizens on deportation flights, with some courts having called your orders unlawful. Secretary Noem, I just have 3 questions for you. 1, why did you lie under oath by saying DHS was following all federal court orders when they clearly were not?
Congressman.
Question 2, let me finish my questions. Question 2, why did you mislead the American people when you said that no American citizens have been arrested or detained by federal immigration agents? And my last question, number 3, Donald Trump said that your ICE agents haven't gone far enough. Do you think terrorizing American citizens and assaulting peaceful protesters isn't far enough?
Congressman, the Department of Homeland Security and this administration complies with all federal court orders. We always have, and we always will.
Not true.
And we will continue to appeal. And sir, I will even tell you that at the highest court, at the Supreme Court, the Department of Homeland Security in our litigation has an over 90% success rate in winning at the highest court in our battle against activist judges across this country.
Madam
We have
Secretary,
activist judges that we will
the-
continue to appeal. And then when it gets to the highest court and we get a decision, it is proven that
I
we
wanna
are
reclaim my
right,
time
that we
here.
have been compliant. I will also say, you
Ma-
talk
Madam-
about
Madam
deporting of
Secretary, let-
US
let
Do
me-
you want me to answer your questions or not?
I do, but let me, you haven't been telling us the truth. Look, there have been at least 170 known cases of citizens being arrested or detained by federal immigration agents this year alone. This is the truth. Are you lying to the American people right now by denying these reports?
When we are doing our targeted enforcement operations against criminal illegal aliens, individuals that are in that area may be detained until we verify who they are, and then they are released. This has been done for years, and every single law enforcement operation that has always happened, we follow the same protocols, and we continue to do that. We have never once detained or deported an American citizen. We have not held them
Not
and
true.
charged them. When we find out
Not
and
true.
verify their identity, then that is when they are released. You also asked about ICE agents going far enough. Sir, I will tell you that every single ICE agent, CBP agent, federal law enforcement officer that's out there doing their work every day, none of them will rest until our communities are safe. None of them will rest until
Secretary
terrorists,
Noem,
criminals
it is a fact that
off
you
of our
ignored federal
streets
orders.
and our children and our grandchildren can grow
Let
up
me
in a country
reclaim my
that
time
truly
here,
is
please.
safe.
Let me reclaim. Secretary Noem, it is a fact that you ignored federal court orders in March and in May of this year. Do you plan on ignoring more federal orders?
We
I'm
always
sick, I'm
comply
sick
with
of,
all federal
sick
court
of your
orders.
lies, and the American people demand the
Because
truth.
you keep saying it doesn't make it true.
I am sick of your lies. The American people are sick of these lies. American people demand truth.
America is very happy that finally they have a president in the White House that gets up every day to keep them safe.
Madam Secretary, your incompetence and your inability to truthfully carry out your duties of Secretary of Homeland Security, if you're not fired, will you resign?
Sir, I will consider your asking me to resign as an endorsement of my work. Thank you very much.
I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. I'll remind members that they are entitled to ask questions during their time. Witnesses are entitled to answer those questions. Members are entitled to reclaim their time. So if we're going to have questions and answers, please allow it. You can reclaim your time if you want, but witnesses are here voluntarily. Please at least give them a chance to answer the questions that you're asking. I now recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Pfluger, for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and it's unfortunate that our colleagues on the other side of the aisle for 5 straight years now have no concern for anything worldwide threats-wise, and have proven that. We're supposed to be talking about worldwide threats, but unfortunately we're talking about homeland threats in our homeland. And Director, can you just reaffirm the number for us of people that match the terror watch list that are in our country?
There's 18,000 known and suspected terrorists in the country right now that came in under Joe Biden's watch.
18,000.
18,000.
That's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
And that's just what we know of, Congressman.
Secretary, despite even members on this committee that have called our law enforcement and ICE and DHS and Border Patrol and other agents names and slandered them, I support you and I support what you're doing to secure the homeland. The Working Families Tax Act allocated $13.5 billion to the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Justice to reimburse states for the cost of the Biden-Harris administration's open border policies. No state suffered more than Texas. Fentanyl, drug and human trafficking, violent crime, stress on local emergency response services caused substantial damage to my district, to our state, to my constituents, to people that live and work in Texas. And in response, our state launched Operation Lone Star to secure the border when the Biden administration abdicated their responsibility to do that. We built miles of border wall, we had other barriers, we deployed state troopers, National Guard to deter the invasion that we suffered during this time period, which cost our state over $11 billion. And so as part of this Working Families Tax Act, we allocated $13.5 billion to reimburse those states. Last month, along with our senators, I led the Republican Texas delegation in sending a letter to you and Attorney General Bondi highlighting this and requesting that the state of Texas be fully reimbursed. And I wanted to get a status on that reimbursement today.
Yes, thank you. And we still to this day remain incredibly grateful to the state of Texas for their leadership during that time. That was challenging times, devastating times for what we saw happening down there. And Texas stepped up in a way that was absolutely incredible. So yes, those dollars are being formulated and allocated. If you remember, many states deployed their National Guard down there. I was governor of South Dakota at that time, and my National Guard was deployed down there as well. So reconciling the costs for every single state and looking at that allocation, we're making sure we're doing due diligence to make sure that it's appropriated correctly.
And just to be clear, I want to make sure that that money does come in the form of the reimbursement to Texas.
That's what we're working with the White House on doing, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
When it comes to what Director Kent talked about, these 18,000 people, can you give us an idea of who these people are, what type of threat they pose to us? We saw it wasn't some accident. This was an assassination and a murder. It was not an accident, despite my colleagues saying that it was an accident. It was a murder and an assassination of a National Guard hero. So what other types of threats are you tracking and preventing from happening?
Yeah, I would say, sir, that we face the terrorists that we've faced for years in ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Hamas, individuals that are here that are radicalized, but also we face the cartels as they've infiltrated our country under the last administration, their proliferation of human trafficking, drugs, and violence, going after Tren de Aragua as well, MS-13. Those individuals are still a very real, clear danger every day on the streets, and we encounter them, arrest them, and deport them, and bring them to justice each and every day. Beyond that, sir, you even have gangs in cities that are localized that are terrorist organizations. The Latin Kings in Chicago are absolutely terrorists to their communities, and we work every day to make sure that we're protecting those communities. So I could not prioritize one over another because they're all killers. They're all killers, and they all are destroying families each and every day.
For both you and Director Kent, do terrorist organizations around the world, such as ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and others, still have an intent to attack America, to attack our homeland, to utilize
Absolutely.
every method?
Absolutely. Our intelligence and our information that we deal with every single day is addressing those threats on our streets here in the United States.
Director Kent, can you give us an idea of what those tactics, techniques, and procedures could be that we need to stay alert of?
Honestly, the attacks of October 7th, the decentralized and just barbaric nature of that is the new terrorist playbook. They're not looking necessarily for a spectacular attack like we had on 9/11, but targets of opportunity like we tragically saw with the terrorist attack in Washington, D.C., these smaller cells or even individual operatives taking action. That's what has us very concerned, combined with just the sheer volume.
My time has expired. Secretary, thank you for your commitment to reimburse Texas. I yield back.
Gentleman's time's expired. I now recognize the gentleman from Rhode Island, Mr. Magaziner, for 5 minutes of questions.
Madam Secretary, how many United States military veterans have you deported?
Sir, we have not deported U.S. citizens or military veterans.
I don't believe you served in the military. I haven't either, but I think you and I can agree that as Americans, we owe everything to those who have served our country in uniform, particularly those who have served in combat. Do you agree with that?
Sir, I believe that people that are in this United States that are citizens have legal status here. Those
Madam
that don't
Secretary,
should
we
not
are
be
joined
here.
on Zoom by a gentleman named Se-Jun Park. He is a United States Army combat veteran who was shot twice while serving our country in Panama in 1989. Like many veterans, he struggled with PTSD and substance abuse after his service. He was arrested in the 1990s for some minor drug offenses, nothing serious. He never hurt anyone besides himself, and he's been clean and sober for 14 years. He is a combat veteran, a Purple Heart recipient. He has sacrificed more for this country than most people ever have. Earlier this year, you deported him to Korea, a country he hasn't lived in since he was 7 years old. Will you join me in thanking Mr. Park for his service to our country?
Sir, I'm grateful for every single person that has served our country and follows our
And
laws.
can you please
and
tell
knows
Mr.
that our
Park
laws
why
are
you
important
deported
and
him?
every one of them needs to be enforced.
But you understand that many veterans struggle with PTSD, many veterans struggle with substance abuse challenges. This man took 2 bullets for our country. You have broad authority, by the way, as Secretary, to issue humanitarian parole, to do deferred action. Will you commit to at least looking at Mr. Park's case to see if you can help him find a pathway back to this country that he sacrificed so much for?
I will absolutely look at his case, but I want you
Thank
to
you.
remember that
Madam
our
Secretary, the
programs
man
need to have
behind you,
integrity as
please
well.
stand up, sir. His name is Jim Brown from Troy, Missouri. He is a Navy combat veteran who served our country in the Gulf War. He's married to a woman named Donna, who came to our country legally from Ireland when she was 11 years old. She has lived here for 48 years. Because of you, Jim's wife Donna has been in prison for the last 4 months. She did not come here illegally, and she has never committed any crime other than writing 2 bad checks totaling $80 10 years ago. She is currently in prison and facing deportation. Ms. Noem, will you thank Mr. Brown for his service to our country?
Thank you, Mr. Brown, for your service to our country.
Now, what possible explanation can there be for locking up his wife for 4 months when she has committed no crime other than writing a couple of bad checks for $80?
Sir, it is not my prerogative, my latitude, or my job to pick and choose which laws in this country get
You
enforced.
have
and
broad
which ones
discretion
don't.
as the Secretary.
We need to follow
You can issue
the law
parole, you
and
can do all
enforce
kinds
the
of things,
laws.
but you're choosing not to. Will you commit, again, to just reviewing Donna's case and reuniting this combat veteran with his beloved wife, who also loves this country?
I will review the case.
Now, Madam Secretary, you've already heard the story of Lance Corporal Alejandro Barranco, the United States Marine veteran who is behind you, who also has two brothers who are United States Marines. Will you thank Lance Corporal Barranco for his service?
Thank you for your service.
His father, Narcisco Barranco, is a landscaper in California who has lived peacefully in our country for 30 years and has no criminal record. Last spring, while he was mowing the lawn at an IHOP, ICE agents tackled him in the street and imprisoned him for weeks. A peaceful, hard-working man who raised 3 sons to be United States Marines. We need men of that character in this country. Again, as Secretary, you have broad discretion. Will you consider Lance Corporal Barranco's father for parole in place to stay in our country, owing to the fact that he has contributed to our country by raising 3 United States Marines?
This is an opportunity to remind everybody that every person that's in this country illegally has an opportunity to voluntarily go home and come back the right way.
He raised 3 United States
We will
Marines.
facilitate that.
He has been living here peacefully, doing his job for 30 years. You have discretion. You are choosing not to use it. Madam Secretary, you promised America that you would go after the worst of the worst. But these people are not the worst of the worst. A Purple Heart recipient, a military spouse, the father of 3 Marines. And it's not just veterans and military families. You are locking up and deporting children with cancer, mothers with babies in the NICU, United States citizens. There are many problems with your leadership, but the biggest problem is this. You don't seem to know how to tell the difference between the good guys and the bad guys. Go after the bad guys. Go after the terrorists. Do not go after veterans, Marines, children,
Gentleman's
United
time's
States
expired.
citizens. I yield back.
Time's expired. I now recognize the gentlelady from Georgia, Ms. Green, for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you. The previously Democrat-controlled administration allowed over 13 million border crossers from over 170 countries and territories to break our laws, invade our country, rape our women and children, and murder our own people. They set all-time records for the highest number of illegal aliens ever encountered in a single day at 14,500, in a single month at 370,000, and in a single year at 3 million, not including the known gotaways. Thanks to Secretary Noem and the hard work of Tom Homan and all the brave men and women at DHS, our new Republican-controlled admin has produced the safest and most secure border our country has ever seen. Thank you very much for that. For the 7th consecutive month, U.S. Border Patrol released 0 illegal aliens into the United States. Daily average apprehensions at the southern border are 95% lower than the daily average under the last administration. 10 months under Trump has seen less apprehensions than 1 month under Biden. Since January 21 through the end of November, there have been 117,105 total enforcement encounters along the southwest border, which is nearly 40% less than the monthly average during the Biden administration. Meanwhile, there has been an 8,000 increase in death threats against ICE law enforcement. Secretary Noem, back in July, the department put out a press release titled "Worst of the Worst." Criminal proceedings begin in a case of transgender illegal alien accused of rape, child rape, not just rape, child rape of a 14-year-old boy in a sanctuary New York City bathroom. I wanted to highlight this case because it encapsulates so many different violent policies of Democrats. This is an increase in trans violence with their embrace of gender ideology, an egregious catch and release policy implemented under the last 4 years, and sanctuary cities that harbor criminal illegal alien monsters that have raped and murdered many Americans. Can you discuss further what you're facing in these sanctuary cities and the illegal alien monsters that have been released into American communities under the Biden administration?
Yeah, unfortunately, Congresswoman, we arrest individuals like that every day because they're so prevalent on our streets, because of what happened under the Biden administration. Every day we're able to go out and encounter and bring to justice individuals who are raping our children, murdering our mothers, our grandmothers, our families are devastated by them. And I'm shocked at the Democrats' constant defense of these individual criminals over the American citizen that is out there just trying to live their lives, put food on the table, and live the American dream. And what we do at the Department of Homeland Security by making sure that we're out enforcing the law every day is making sure that those families get a chance to do that. So I'm so grateful for them. The 8,000% increase in death threats is real. These ICE agents and CBP officers that are out on our streets doing God's work live in these communities. They live there. These are their families and their neighbors that they're protecting, and they get up every day and do that job because they believe in their mission. They take an oath, and they are honorable men and women who are serving with greatness during a challenging time when activists and radicals attack them and put their lives in danger. I think it's shameful to see the defense of individuals who break our laws. We are a nation of laws. If we are not a nation of laws, we're no nation at all. And that is what we are doing every day, is following those. If you guys don't like the law, go change it. That's your job. You don't complain. I was raised by a dad who said we don't complain about things. We fix them. Well, go fix them. If you don't like the law, quit bellyaching, quit hitting and attacking our ICE officers, quit going out and protesting and screaming vile things at them, quit calling them names. We wouldn't let our children do that. Go do something that actually matters by having an honest debate and changing the law. That's your jobs. You all should be fired, in my viewpoint.
I agree. Thank you so much for that, Secretary Noem. Back in 2021, I was one of only 16 members who voted against the Allies Act of 2021, which increased the number of special immigrant visas for Afghan nationals and loosened vetting requirements for eligibility. This brought in over 76,000 Afghans. Director Kent, what actions are being taken to identify and remove any of the 100,000 Afghan nationals admitted under the Biden admin who may have ties to terrorism, like the one who shot 2 National Guard members, tragically killing Sarah Beckstrom here in Washington, D.C.?
I'm sorry, gentlelady's time has expired, but
Can he just answer
no, we're
quickly?
keeping everything quick to the 5 minutes. I'm sorry, but gentleman from New York is now recognized, Mr. Goldman, for 5 minutes.
Secretary Noem, let's talk about the law. Do you agree that asylum is a lawful pathway to immigrate to this country? Yes or no?
There's an asylum program, yes, in place.
All right. So
It wasn't
immigrants
used under
then
the
with
Biden
ongoing asylum applications are legally in this country, correct?
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Your question was?
Immigrants with ongoing asylum applications are legally in this country.
There are individuals in this country that have applications that
And they are legally here because it's a lawful pathway, right?
it's a lawful pathway.
Okay, so
And I
if
will-
your department then deports anyone with an ongoing asylum application, you are violating the law, correct?
Joe Biden left us with.
I'm not asking about Joe Biden. I'm asking you a
1.5
specific
million
question.
cases
If your
backlogged
department
asylum
deports anyone with
Facts.
an
The program-
ongoing asylum application, you
program
are
was
violating the
greatly
law. Is that
violated.
correct?
It was greatly violated when they allowed
I'm
1.5
asking
million
you.
people to come
I'm
in and
asking you.
granted asylum applications.
Why are you filibustering? Why
by
can't you
ignoring
answer
the
the
laws.
question? It's a
Because,
simple
Joe,
question.
your president
If your department
and your secretary
deports
did not
anyone
follow the law
with an
which those
ongoing
applications
asylum application, you are violating the law. Isn't that correct?
The asylum program was
Okay.
broken under the last.
Mr. Chairman, I will reclaim my time. She's not answering the question. But the obvious answer is that, yes, if you follow a lawful pathway, asylum is a lawful pathway, if you have an open asylum case, you are here lawfully. But the problem that we are seeing around the country is that you are not following the law. Don't tell us to change the law. If you don't like the asylum system, you change the asylum law. Bring it to us. We'll work with you. I think it needs to be changed. But you can't just decide that you're not going to follow the law, and asylum is a law, and deport people who have ongoing applications. Unfortunately, that is exactly what's happening. It's happening across the street from my office right in New York City. Numerous, thousands of people who have come to court appearances, have left them with open asylum applications, have been arrested. And then they've been shipped off and many deported. In September, one applicant was ripped away from his wife and small children after such a court appearance. And then this happened to his wife. Please play the video. No, it's not. It's not this one. All right, it's not this video. Here it is. Now, after this incident, your department issued a statement that said the officer's conduct in this video is unacceptable and beneath the men and women of ICE. Our ICE law enforcement are held to the highest professional standards, and this officer is being relieved of current duties as we conduct a full investigation. 3 days later, you reinstated that officer and you put him back on duty. I sent you a letter and asked you what investigation was done and why was he reinstated. You did not answer that letter. So I'm going to give you an opportunity right here to explain to me that if that officer's conduct was, quote, beneath the men and women of ICE, unquote, why did you reinstate him?
Sir, that investigation was completed. I can give you that investigation and the information that you would like. This is
Well, I wrote you 2 months ago. Why haven't you given it to me yet?
I'm actually surprised that you haven't gotten it. I'm going to ask my staff about that.
Well, you shouldn't be
because I have
surprised
responded
because generally
to
speaking, you
hundreds
do
and
not
hundreds, if
respond
not
to
thousands
us.
of your letters.
Now, the other problem that we are
Mayorkas, when he had
seeing
this
all
job,
over
didn't
the
respond to
country
letters for years.
is that your officers are wearing masks, are dressed in plain clothes, often going around without identification.
All of our officers are
And
identified.
I'm not asking a question. I introduced the No Secret Police Act to stop this. And we now have 113 co-sponsors so that they will not be masked and that they will identify themselves. Now, you say all of them are identifying themselves. That is not the case because last month in New York City again, the NYPD officers were injured by your masked, plainclothes ICE officers after they were called from 911 as residents witnessed your officers pulling individuals out of their vehicles and chasing them down the street. I also asked you what happened there. How were the NYPD officers injured by your officers? And you didn't respond. What's the answer?
Sir, our individual
Gentlemen's
officers
time
are
is
identified.
time has expired.
I yield
I
back.
recognize gentleman from Texas, Mr. Gonzalez, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Secretary Noem. Thank you, Director Kent and Director Glasson, for your patriotism, your service to our country. Thank you to the families for allowing everyone to serve. We're grateful for that. Democrats like to show clip after clip. I represent a district that's half of the southern border. Our lives were turned upside down under Joe Biden, and now we have our lives back due to President Trump and due to the policies that y'all are executing. So thank you. I have one question, but I'm going to try to, if there's time. I think it'd be important for the American people to get an update on the role Coast Guard played in the Venezuela oil tanker seizure. But first, I'd like to thank you for being here. And so I'd like to first thank you, CISA. Thank you for keeping our nation's critical infrastructure safe. You are our nation's cyber first responders. Thank you to the Coast Guard. During our Texas floods, you showed up, Coast Guard showed up, you saved lives. Thank you to the Coast Guard for all the work that they've done in Jayada South. They've been the tip of the spear in the Southcom AOR for a long time. Their work often goes unnoticed. Thank you, HSI, for leading these anti-gang task force. They work. They're going out there. You're apprehending murderers. You're apprehending sexual offenders. You're doing it in a local, state, federal way. They're working. Thank you for that. Thank you, ICE. Thank you for keeping us safe by deporting all these people. I really appreciate the innovative idea of DHS owning its own airplanes. It's ridiculous that we had to essentially contract out in order to have these repatriation flights. That is a game changer. Thank you for that. Thank you, ERO, for adding bed space. This is exactly how we continue to deport the millions of convicted criminal aliens that are in this country. Thank you, NCTC, for keeping us safe. You're exactly right. We thank you for vetting, for going out and finally doing the role of vetting these people. You and I served overseas. Many of us did. And we know oftentimes it was more dangerous at the chow hall than outside the wire, right? So thank you for that vetting. Thank you, Border Patrol, for ending catch and release. Thank you, TSA, for keeping us safe during all our travel, and then also looking into any future vulnerabilities. Thank you, Secret Service. Thank you for not only keeping our leaders safe, but a lot of people don't realize Secret Service is key to school safety. I think that's just so important that brings us all together. I wanted to say I want to use the bulk of my time to just thank you, because we don't do that enough here. It's always finger pointing, it's always somebody else's fault. Please go back to your agencies and thank the men and women that are serving every day and helping to keep this country safe. With that, I'd like to give you a little time to talk about the Venezuelan situation and what the Coast Guard is doing.
The operation that was conducted yesterday morning was a Coast Guard-led operation. It was in partnership with the Department of War and the Department of Justice, the FBI as well, and it was a successful operation directed by the President to ensure that we're pushing back on a regime that is systematically covering and flooding our country with deadly drugs and killing our next generation of Americans. Just the drugs that the Coast Guard has been able to interdict on the waters since that President Trump has been in office has been enough lethal doses of cocaine to kill 177 million Americans. That's 2/3 of our country that has been saved by blowing up, by going after and bringing to justice these individuals that are out at sea and those individuals that are funding it with a shadow fleet of sanctioned oil that should never be sold to benefit their profits and their pockets to kill Americans.
Thank you for that update. For many of us that served in uniform, oftentimes it was overseas. It was in the Middle East, or it was in Asia, or it was in Europe. And I think those AORs are very important. But for too long, president after president after president, our backyard has been left wide open, and we are completely shocked why all these terrorists are in our country and all these people are unvetted, all this chaos is happening when in our own backyard was unsafe. So thank you again for one. I know you traveled, you met with heads of state, El Salvador, Mexico, a couple that come to mind. But I just want to thank you and for making our backyard a priority and ultimately to keep Americans safe. Texans are more safe today than we were a year ago. And a lot of that is due to President Trump and due to the leadership that I'm seeing right here of executing those policies. Thank you, thank you, thank you. With that, Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize the gentlelady from Illinois, Ms. Ramirez, for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Chairman.
American citizens have been arrested or detained. We focus on those that are here illegally.
Secretary Noem, you lie and you lied to the American people. I will be including into the record an article by ProPublica from October 16, 2025, entitled, "We found that more than 170 U.S. citizens have been held by immigration agents. They've been kicked." There's nothing smiling about U.S. citizens. I'm sorry, that's very inappropriate. Let me continue. They've been kicked, dragged, and detained for days. The next one.
The Trump administration has specifically targeted the worst of the worst. The individuals that we are going after are those that are violent criminals, those that are breaking our laws.
Secretary Noem, again, you lied to the American people. I will be including into the record an article by the NBC News from December 7, 2025, entitled, "ICE has arrested nearly 75,000 people with no criminal records, data shows." A co-equal branch of government, and it is your obligation as a member of the executive branch to honor decisions made by the highest court of the land. Yes or no, Secretary?
We are abiding by all federal judges' orders, absolutely.
The Justice Department said that when the administration was ordered back in March to stop sending detained migrants to a mega prison in El Salvador, you personally made the final call to continue the flights anyway. Is that correct?
And the decisions that are made on deportations, where flights go and when they go, are my decision at the Department of Homeland Security. And we'll continue to do the right thing, continue to work and protect Americans, no matter what radical judge comes out and tries to stop us. We'll do.
You lied on the record, and you lied to members of this committee. You violated court orders by not turning around deportation flights bound for El Salvador, where we know that hundreds of people under your leadership have reported that they were raped, they were beaten, and they nearly died. And your agents used chemical weapons in Chicago despite court orders from District Court Judge Ellis forbidding their use. Secretary Noem, you, Gregory Bovino, and your ICBP and DHS deputized agents have waged an unaccountable, unlawful, unconstitutional war against communities across the nation. Our residents have been surveilled, they've been threatened, they've been tear gassed, they've been hit with pepper balls, they've been shot, they've been subjected to warrantless arrest and precision immobilization maneuvers, they've been kidnapped and disappeared under your leadership. So we have a lot to talk about, but you and your department continue to reject congressional oversight. And you know how I know this? I know this because I've requested a meeting with ICE Field Office Director Russell Hott. I requested a meeting with Field Office Director Samuel Olson. And when you came to Chicago on October 3rd, I publicly and formally requested a meeting with you. So I'm going to be including a letter I sent on October 3rd requesting a meeting with Secretary Noem. So, Secretary Noem, I want to ask you again, will you commit to meet with me, yes or no?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you. So we have a lot to talk about, and actually my scheduler has a couple dates that I'll get to you after this meeting. I appreciate that. So look, I want to be very clear. You have misused resources appropriated by Congress. You've engaged in unethical behavior. You have repeatedly made false and misleading statements to Congress and to the press, and you've undermined the separation of powers and disregarded the role of Congress and the courts. Bottom line, you lie with impunity. You reject checks and balances, and you ignore Congress and the courts. Your options are limited. Either you're going to resign, Trump's going to fire you, or you will be impeached. I've already called for your resignation. You may remember I hand-delivered my request to you back in May, and I urge you to reconsider resignation because I've taken the first step towards your impeachment, and I've called on the Judiciary Committee to open an investigation into your lawlessness. Mr. Chairman, I know that at the end we'll be entering a number of articles into consent, but since I have a few moments, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter calling the Judiciary Committee to investigate Secretary Noem's impeachable offenses. Whatever you choose, the American people will have justice, Secretary, and you will be held accountable. I'm going to make sure of that every single day. With that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. I now recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Luttrell, for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Secretary. It's good to see you, and thank you again for coming to Texas after the Kerrville floods. Your team was amazing. Their interaction with the leadership in our state, up and down the chain of command, was outstanding. Not something I read about, I saw it. So I'm speaking from the truth. So let's talk about worldwide threats, if you don't mind. This may go back and forth to Mr. Glasheen and Mr. Kent. My questions, first and foremost, is the nefarious actors globally, they're kind of everywhere. And as we try to protect the motherland in the cyberspace, air, sea, and land, something that's come to my attention in the committee hearing we had earlier, undersea cabling. And I don't know if you're a subject matter expert on this. I really wasn't until this hearing. But a large amount of our information flows under the water, something that most people aren't aware of, but I can assure you that the bad actors globally probably are. Now, it's multi-jurisdictional from what I understand. It's the Department of Justice, it's Department of War, and then it's Department of Homeland Security. And they kind of juggle the effort. Can you give me some insight on the protection mechanism that Homeland Security has for our undersea cabling? And I consider this a very viable threat specifically for information flow, considering everything that goes back and forth across the water. Can you give me a kind of a high-level briefing considering the atmosphere of what we're looking at?
Yes, I can, and I'll try to leave some time for the other individuals too, but the Department of Homeland Security has 23 different components. Several of them have some responsibility for surveillance and monitoring of those cables and the information that flows through them. So CISA is our cybersecurity agency, which looks for bad actors, hunts down those bad actors, and then hardens our systems. So where we see a weakness or a vulnerability, they help us do that with the interactions we have with private companies, their communications, or other countries. But then we also have our Coast Guard out on the waters each and every day, which help us with surveillance activities to see if there's nefarious actors that would be out there jeopardizing those systems. We have INA, which is our intelligence and analysis. They are the ones that are helping us with our covert operations. They're the ones who are coordinating with our intelligence agencies on what we see as hacking attempts or enemies that would try to endanger those cables or cut them, damage them, so that they couldn't be utilized to keep our critical infrastructure going. FEMA is the agency that's responsible for, on our worst day, if we needed something or someone to run the government, if there was an attack in this country, FEMA is the agency that would do that and maintains the resources to making sure that we have an operating government in an emergency disaster situation.
I know there's redundancy on the cabling system, and there's over, from what I understand, there's over 1 million miles of cable underwater. I want to make sure that we have enough protection in place so the ripple effect is not catastrophic to the country. Mr. Kent, you got something to add there? I was going to shift over to Mr. Glasheen.
In terms of undersea cabling, no, I do not.
Okay. Mr. Glasheen, I have a question for you. So as far as trafficking, human trafficking, drug trafficking, this always hurts me to say this, but Houston, Texas is in my district, and it is the worst city in the country for sex trafficking in the country. I just cannot believe that. What is the FBI doing amongst other agencies? You just happen to be sitting here in front of me. And Madam Secretary, you can probably jump in on this too. Enough's enough. I understand the complexities of the World Wide Web and how these bastards are doing this, and we can't seem to grab a hold of them. What's the answer?
Our HSI investigators specialize in child trafficking and human trafficking. They get up every single day and hunt down those individuals that victimize our children and partner with nonprofits and other agencies with the FBI to do that. Yes, it's shocking to me that Houston is one of the hotbeds as well.
We need to take a better look at this because we're losing. I mean, we're losing so bad, I don't even know how to define it. And this has been happening. I said this exact same thing to Mr. Mayorkas, and if I was here before that, I'd say the same thing again. It's just, we have not figured it out. Mr. Glasheen, you got anything for that?
Yeah, I would tell you, it's been a priority with this director. And, you know, so far this year, compared to last year, we have 300 plus human traffickers arrested, up 15%.
I'm sorry, sir. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I appreciate that, and
I'll catch you after class.
If one of the following witnesses wants to give him some time to answer that very important question, they can do that. Gentleman yields back. I now recognize the gentleman from New York, Mr. Kennedy, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Noem, with about a year as DHS Secretary under your belt, there's no shortage of criticisms for me to choose from today. You've deported American citizens, bringing a level of inhumanity to this nation's immigration laws that I haven't seen in my lifetime. You've terrorized communities, including my own in Buffalo, New York, vowing to go after the worst of the worst, but instead detaining women, children, and hardworking individuals in pursuit of the American dream. You've botched a response to one of the most devastating floods we've seen, an extreme weather event along the Guadalupe River that took more than 130 innocent lives, including more than 35 children. Central Texas waited days for your agency to respond because of the reckless policies you've implemented. Your FEMA lead was missing in action, completely unreachable, as were FEMA's call lines, with 84% of calls unanswered on July 7th, 3 days after the floods. FEMA personnel, despite your slashing of their ranks, who were ready and willing to help, waited days to spring into action because of your policies. Disasters do not wait for bureaucracy. Your abysmal performance goes beyond your woeful disaster response. You've also taken a sledgehammer to FEMA's recovery, preparedness, and mitigation missions. You canceled more than $4 billion in building resilient infrastructure in communities funds, a program that helps communities reduce their risk of natural disasters. You withheld millions in FEMA funds for emergency alerting infrastructure found to be in violation of the Impound Control Act. You, perhaps most critical to my state of New York, canceled more than 90% of New York State's Homeland Security program funding, including $134 million in urban area security initiative funds for New York City's greater metropolitan areas. You have mismanaged these grants to the point where cities and states, including New York, are suing you to recover counterterrorism funding that's lawfully theirs and that Congress intended for them to receive. It's a tragedy that we're here today discussing these cuts to counterterrorism and security grant funds for a city that was the main site of the September 11th attacks, the entire reason your department was established in the first place. As the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Emergency Management, it's my responsibility to show the American public how you've systemically upended FEMA and emergency preparedness as we know it. So I have a couple of questions. Simple yes or no answer will suffice. Would you agree with the national security officials' assessment that the United States has been operating in a heightened threat environment for several years now?
Yes.
Yes or no? Would you say New York City is susceptible to these kinds of security threats?
Yes, and that's why they should spend
So with New York City
$440
being the
million
number
they
one
had in
terrorist
reserves
target in the
that
nation,
the federal government gave them
with
to
New
use
York
to
City
secure
being
their
the number
city,
one, I
which
reclaim
they
my
did
time,
not
with New York
spend.
City being the
They
number
did not
one
spend the hundreds
security
of
threat in
millions
this
of dollars
nation,
they had
it's
to secure their
unconscionable
city
that you
and
would
to
cut
release criminals on the street each and every day.
$134 million in urban area security initiative funding for the city of New York. What compelled you to knowingly make our cities less safe with these funding cuts?
What compels you, your mayor, and your governor to release thousands of criminals on the streets rather than to turn them over to ICE? You'd rather release
Secretary Noem,
a murderer out onto your
Secretary Noem,
street,
you cut
a rapist on your
$134
street,
million
and honor our detainers.
in
You should
funds
honor our detainers
to support the
against violent
security
criminals
of
to get
New
them out
York
of New York
City
City.
and the state of New York, the number one threat in this nation. In your own words, your cuts are blatantly political, callous, and outright dangerous. It's clear you have no interest in countering real threats in the homeland. While high-risk cities and disaster zones wait for help, you've devoted the past 11 months of violent raids, anti-police policies, and nonstop photo ops. You've brought shame to a department that was created after 9/11 in a time of unity to protect our people. Your failure to lead is a direct threat to the homeland security in our nation, and you should resign immediately. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Strong, for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ranking member, and members of this committee. I thank you, too, to our witnesses for being here today, for your work to protect the homeland in an increasingly complex threat environment. My question today focuses specifically on the evolving drone threat. Mr. Glasheen, the FBI's National Counter UAS Training Center at Redstone Arsenal is now the central hub for preparing federal, state, and local partners for drone threats at major events. What makes Redstone Arsenal such an effective location for this mission, and how does that setting support the scale of training required for World Cup, America 250, and the 2028 Olympics?
Thank you for your question, Congressman. What makes Redstone a great partner for us is, one, the support that we have from Congress. Number two, the space we have there. The FBI has been in Huntsville for a long time. Huntsville also houses our Special Agent Bomb Technician Program, where we train bomb technicians, EOD professionals across the United States, and we model in the Counter UAS School off of that. So that proof of concept has been in place, and we're mirroring that process to train the counter U.S. operators.
Thank you. I was there for the inaugural graduation. I'm telling you, it was most impressive. I can assure you there's no other location in the country that offers the same mix of controlled airspace, testing ranges, partnered agencies, and mission infrastructure that the FBI has at Redstone Arsenal. Counter UAS has the ability in Huntsville to jam, block, drop, intercept, and do forensics. As demand for this specialized training grows, what investment should Congress prioritize to ensure long-term stability for this mission at Redstone?
I'd say yesterday, or the legislation in front of, I think, the Senate right now for the NDA, for the authorities, that'd be the first step to give us the ability to lawfully use the counter U.S. authorities. I think additionally, is just like the computer technology, it evolves with the months. And so the counter-UAS technology is going to change, so have the appropriate funding, the support to stay up with that technology so we can mitigate the threats that our nation faces.
Thank you. Those graduates were from all over the country, and it was most impressive. Secretary Noem, this committee has failed to thank you for your faithful service to America. The southern border is closed. Human smugglers, drug traffickers, and illegal aliens that invaded this country from more than 160 different countries are being returned to the country of their origin. Fentanyl poisonings are down more than 35%. Secretary Noem, thank you for your efforts to keep these drugs out of our country in an effort to save a generation of Americans. It's not a Republican issue. It's not a Democratic issue. It's an American issue. And I thank you. Secretary Noem, many of the most advanced counter unmanned aerial systems technologies are being tested and evaluated in North Alabama. How is DHS ensuring that those capabilities transition quickly into field use, particularly ahead of these major events? And what more can Congress do to accelerate the pipeline?
No, we appreciate the authorities that are necessary for us to operate, and standing up a drone program and counter drone program is one of the top 3 priorities of the department this next year to meet the threats that we face every day. Every day, our Secret Service, our Coast Guard, our Border Patrol are seeing drones used against them. Criminals using them to surveil them, to find out law enforcement operations, and to leak them, and to put their lives in danger. So making sure that we have the ability to operate and to see far into the future and over our operations is important, but we also need the opportunity to take them down when necessary. We've seen the cartels using weaponized drones against each other. We know it's only a matter of time before we see that here on the homeland. My job is to make sure that we're prepared and that we're equipped, and to advocate to you for the authorities that we need to make that happen.
Thank you. With the new counter-UAS authorities expected to be enacted as part of the National Defense Authorization Act, the next challenge is execution. What concrete steps is DHS planning to take in the coming months to ensure that these new authorities are fully operational before the FIFA World Cup, the Olympics, and America 250? And I even want to take it even further. You start looking at college football, we've got to take it even further. Rather than they're all large gathering events. I actually had the Secretary of Security of the Southeastern Conference before Mr. Kennedy and my committee, and it was unbelievable. On any given weekend, 8 to 10 football stadiums with greater than 90,000 people there. We must defend the home front. And I'm sorry that my time has expired, but I thank you for being before this committee today.
Gentleman yields. I now recognize the gentlelady from New Jersey, Ms. McIver, for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, for holding this hearing today. The greatest threat to the homeland right now is a Department of Homeland Security that the American people no longer trust, a department actively undermined by its own secretary. This is on you, Secretary Noem. Today's hearing is supposed to be about worldwide threats, but Madam Secretary, under your watch, the threat is coming from inside the building. Because when DHS, the department charged with keeping Americans safe, is caught breaking the law, lying to the American public, systematically dismantling oversight, fueling bigotry, and targeting vulnerable communities, trust is broken. Let's start with the basics. How can we trust your department with you at the helm? The American people deserve an answer, even if you've spent the past year dodging accountability like it's your full-time job. We need to talk about oversight. Oversight is not optional. It is not a courtesy because you feel like it. It is not something you entertain only when it's politically convenient to you. Yet, time and time again, Secretary Noem, you have treated congressional oversight as an inconvenience at best, and at worst, something to be invaded, ignored, or denied altogether. Republicans on this committee may be willing to hand over their constitutional duty in order to kiss this administration's butt cheeks, but I am not. I will never. My district is not, and the American people sure aren't. While Republicans turned this hearing into a praise fest for your failed tenure, communities across America, including mine in New Jersey, are made less safe because DHS under your leadership has become unproductive and malicious. All of the thank you that we keep hearing from across the aisle, there's no thank you from me. And we see the truth that you're trying to hide. The truth is you are deeply unqualified for the post you hold. This is on full display in the way you treat the people in this body, myself included, who have been elected to serve our communities and keep them safe. Representative Grajava, Senator Padilla, myself and others whose character, integrity, and bodies were attacked by your department without evidence and without apology. Far beyond being disrespectful, you have shown a complete disregard for the oversight authority granted to us by law. You have repeatedly shown that you will target whoever you want, whenever you want, without accountability. Members of Congress, members of our communities, and even American citizens, as many of my colleagues have continued to point out today. Secretary Noem, that's not leadership. That's not democracy. And that is not how this works. Again, this is not just about you. Don't want you to think this is just a pick on you day. This is about the Trump administration that has turned DHS into a political weapon. So I'll ask you this. Is Trump embarrassed by your tenure, or is this exactly the kind of god-awful leadership he wants at DHS? Yes or no?
Ma'am, we've already conducted more oversight visits.
No, it's a yes or no. Yes or no. Okay, Secretary Noem, this is my time to talk, not your time to talk. I reclaim my time. I reclaim my time. I reclaim my time. Chair, I reclaim my time. Secretary Noem, DHS is breaking the law, hiding information from Congress and shutting out oversight. So let me ask you, how can the American people trust your department with you at the helm with this kind of behavior?
The American people absolutely trust this department to keep them safe. And we are showing that every day by the support we get across the country, the amount of people that we're recruiting to all of our different agencies.
Thank you, Secretary Noem. Do you agree that using DHS resources to target members of Congress is an abuse of power?
Excuse me, would you say that
You
again?
would have heard me if you stopped talking and listened to my questions. Do you agree that using DHS resources to target members of Congress is an abuse of power?
We are not doing that. We are out there enforcing the law, doing our work, and we are allowing oversight.
Of course, we're not going to get any answers. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. I now recognize the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. McKean, for 5 minutes of questions.
It's no wonder that chaos has become the commonplace when rudeness is so on display. Look, it's both sides. We've created a lack of civility in this country, but we're perpetuating in this society what your administration is trying to correct, and that is returning back to the rule of law. What separates us from falling into chaos as a nation where poverty envelops us is when we return to order and a display of respect towards law enforcement, a display of respect to officials. Look, this custom, and you've been a member of Congress, of where we talk over people and we don't give secretaries a chance to respond, the height of self-importance that too many people try to employ in this building, not remembering we're all here as public servants to serve the people. We lift our hearts up far beyond our fellow countrymen. I'll tell you who says thank you. It's those whose families that were the victim of assaults and rapes and murders under the auto pen period the last 4 years. They say thank you. Those who see the madness of lawlessness, the lack of respect to law enforcement, the heightened element of law enforcement sitting in their vehicles and being targeted, say thank you. Those families of law enforcement whose addresses are being put out in public so they can intimidate not only the law enforcement officials, but their families to try to put them into a place of fear, say thank you for common sense returning back into this country. If we do not have a respect of authority, a respect of law enforcement, thank you for allowing arrests to happen when someone spits at law enforcement. Thank you. FEMA, you were assaulted a minute ago verbally over what you're doing with FEMA. I will tell you, as somebody that comes from a state that has more tornadoes, Oklahoma, than probably any other state, thank you for looking at how we can save money through efficiencies. Our state would love the opportunity of what this administration is talking about, of returning power and decision-making back to states. As I've said to you before, of a person who sat on a bulldozer watching the madness of trying to comply with EPA regs that have built their way into FEMA and people's homes destroyed, and as a state lawmaker pushing timber around on a dozer trying to comply and get taking the time off from time of exercise as a lawmaker trying to help people, and I saw the craziness of federal regulations. Thank you for looking and not taking your foot off the gas of trying to put more money back into national security from the waste that has happened through endless regs. All right, now I'm going to get to a question,
Can
Secretary.
I say something about FEMA?
Absolutely, you can. Thank you.
The only grants that weren't funded, the individual ones that you were talking about, mitigation ahead, were ones that were weaponized to fund the Green New Deal and for climate change. And those were redirected to true mitigation efforts. FEMA today is deploying resources 2 times faster on average than in history, which means the dollars are going out twice as fast than they ever have before. And the president, as soon as these disasters are happening, is deploying those resources to Republican and Democrat states. New Mexico, Texas, Alaska, they're all getting dollars immediately, and we're responding immediately to our people. I have to actually leave this hearing early because the FEMA Review Council is giving their report today on suggestions for changes to FEMA.
Thank you for not taking your foot off the gas on that.
I have to co-chair it, but I will be leaving soon to have to go do that. But those suggestions are Republicans and Democrats coming forward with how FEMA should go forward in the future based on the president's vision for making sure that states get the chance to manage it and that local emergency managers get the chance to go and help their communities in a much more efficient way.
Take those monies and let's move them to true national security through waste and inefficiencies. Where we've deployed money for snow movement. We have deployed money previously to move snow that melts. Okay, I want to just throw this open to you and Director Kent, whoever wants to take this. We have to find a balance between making sure the First Amendment is preserved at all costs, but also protecting law enforcement. The social media heightened of a hearing that the chairman held last week, great hearing. How do we preserve, what ideas can we continue with to where the online enticement threats causing people to want to embolden themselves to then go act upon those threats that we see in social media. They say the magic words. They know it's not going to get them because they don't do a direct threat, but it's an indirect threat. It's always trying to accomplish the same purpose. How do we preserve the First Amendment? This is a lawmaking exercise of why we hold these hearings, not for show. How do we come up with a way to preserve the First Amendment and stop the insanity of these indirect threats that are going after your law enforcement officials?
I apologize. The gentleman's time has expired. I know the secretary has to leave, and I would now recognize a gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Johnson, for 5 minutes of questions.
I'm just going to take the position that she was scared of my questions. Mr. Chairman, if we could stop the clock and
Oh, yes,
wait
no,
till after all
absolutely.
this.
Clerk will suspend.
If we could reset the time,
Yes.
that would be helpful.
We'll reset the clock. Gentlelady, prepared?
Okay. Thank you.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I just want to respond to a lot of what Secretary Noem has just testified to. And gentlemen, I have some comments that I hope you'll take back to the Secretary and to the Department. If there's anything that is clear about what is going on in this country, is that the rhetoric and fear that is happening is at an all-time escalated high, and we're all describing different aspects of it. fear of law enforcement, fear of citizens, fear of people who are legally in this country, because it's the rhetoric that is happening from the very top, that is being decimated down level, and that is really, really dangerous. And one of the things that the Secretary said was she is restoring the rule of law. That is absolutely not true, because the rule of law is founded on two fundamental principles. That if you are going to be subject to a criminal arrest in this country, that there is probable cause to do so. You can't just snatch somebody walking into a coffee shop because of the color of their skin. There's no probable cause for that. And also that you will get due process. And that is not happening. And so what you're seeing is an overwhelming frustration of the American people in this country, that the lack of respect and regard for the rule of law by this administration, and in particular by this secretary, is at a level that we have never seen and violates all of the constitutional norms and all of the principles of legal fairness in this country. And you're seeing that manifest itself in threats to law enforcement and bubbling over, because people are frustrated, and they are channeling that frustration because the administration is not listening and is only doubling down on the rhetoric. You know, this notion that I think my colleagues highlighted, that we're only going to pursue serious threats. It's just not true. I visited an ICE facility outside of Dallas, and over 70% of them were classified as the lowest threat level, as never having a criminal record at all. But yet they were there because of the color of their skin. There was not a probable cause. They're not a threat to this country. They have no criminal history at all. I fully support, as does everyone on this committee, Homeland Security focusing on threats to our national security. We want cybersecurity. We want terroristic threats from abroad to be stopped. Absolutely. None of us want a recreation of 9/11, but we also do not want, under any level, the trampling of our constitutional rights and the legal system of due process. I have a poster here to highlight 3 American citizens that were arrested by ICE, who had done nothing wrong. They presented themselves as American citizens, but yet were still trampled, assault. One had broken ribs, a brain injury, an older gentleman by being knocked down to the ground after he said, "I'm an American citizen." But yet they did not stop. And that is a huge problem. When somebody says, "I'm an American citizen," to ICE, and ICE does not stop and continues to assault them and physically berate them and then hold them for days and days on end without a due process hearing, that is a problem. And it is not stopping. We have brought these concerns to the Secretary and to agencies like yourself in these hearings time and time again, through multiple letters. We've all written letters that have gone unresponded, because this cannot happen in our country. And the reality of it is, in any law enforcement situation, and what we have happening out into the public, is there are ICE agents and there are Border Patrol agents that are doing their great job. They're doing what they're supposed to do. But there are also bad actors. There are people who are exceeding their authority. The power's gone to their head. The intimidation is outrageous. And there's no effort to rein them in by the FBI. There's no effort to rein them in by the Homeland Security. There's no effort to overcorrect. Just like one of my colleagues highlighted, the reinstatement of one that was inappropriate. And these efforts are breaking down the trust of the American people. I hope you take these concerns back, because they need to be addressed if we're going to address the violence in this country. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. I now recognize the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Creighton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this committee hearing today. Thank you for the witnesses. Director Kent, you talked about what keeps you up at night. I believe you said, we don't know who came into the country in the last 4 years. And we've cited several times in this hearing that about 15 to 20 million people came into this country under the last administration. And something that you said actually shocked me. You said that 18,000 known and suspected terrorists entered into the country during the Biden administration. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's deeply concerning, but I'm really not surprised. Many of us in this committee said that's exactly what was going to happen. I didn't know that those numbers would be as high as they are. One of the other things that really concerns me about what's going on in this country is we continue to let people into this country that do not want to assimilate to our culture and want to harm Americans. I want to go ahead and play a video.
Law should be above the U.S. Constitution.
Yes. Yes.
Should Sharia law be over the U.S. Constitution?
Yes.
U.S. Constitution, which is made by people, and the Sharia law is made by Allah. So that is all the way above. That has to be definitely in the land, not for the America, for the whole world would be above. The
So
Sharia
that
law.
should be above the U.S.
Definitely.
Constitution.
Yes.
Do you feel more comfortable living under American law, or do you feel more comfortable living under Sharia law?
Sharia law. I'm a Muslim. I prefer Sharia law. Sharia law, yes.
You prefer Sharia law over American law?
Of course, yeah.
They always can come with the same accusations. This speaker supports death penalty for homosexuals. This speaker supports death penalty for this crime or that he is homophobic. These are general views that every Muslim actually has. Every Muslim believes in these things.
If the law of the land is Islamic, we will respect the law of the land.
What if it's not Islamic?
If it's not Islamic, then the law of the land and those who make it can go to hellfire, honestly, because Allah said in the Quran, in chapter 33, verse 1, He said, O Prophet, fear Allah and do not obey the disbelievers and the hypocrites.
You know why they're worried about the border? Watch this clip here that Vinny just sent with Al-Qaeda. I call upon every Muslim in the infidel, criminal, and arrogant United States. Does not matter if they're Arab, American, or other descent. I'm saying to all of them, revenge, revenge. Do not consult anyone about killing infidel Americans. You should have a lot of determination, and a list of your targets should be effective.
Director Kent, what do you think when you see a video like that?
I think we didn't have control of our borders, and we don't know who's come into our country. However, we have had around 2.7 million individuals from Muslim countries and Muslim regions who came in under the Biden administration, who went through minimal to no vetting whatsoever, who probably share values like the folks that you saw on the screen.
Director Kent, are you aware that when we invite people into this country and they become citizens, they swear an oath to defend and support the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America and against all enemies, foreign and domestic?
Yes.
What do you believe the long-term consequences will be if the United States continues admitting individuals who either openly reject assimilation into American civic culture or who falsely swear an oath to uphold the Constitution despite having no intention of honoring it?
We simply won't have a country anymore as we know it. I think we can look to Europe and to the UK to see exactly where this leads.
I agree 100%. Director Kent, are you aware of some of the differences between U.S. Constitution and common law interpretations of the Sharia law?
I am broadly, yeah.
What are the differences in your opinion, and I know you're not a doctorate on this subject, but between the First Amendment, which guarantees freedom of speech and the press, including the right to criticize religions, religious texts, and public figures without government punishment?
Yeah, the freedom of speech, I think, is huge because you don't have that under Sharia law, and you also don't have the assumption of innocence under Sharia law as we do.
Many interpretations of Sharia, blasphemy, criticism of the Quran or the Prophet Muhammad can be a serious offense, sometimes punishable by death. And there are many others that I don't have time to get to, but I wanted to bring that up today so that Americans understand the differences and why we need to be very careful about who we let into this country. I thank you guys for the work you do. I thank you for those underneath you working so hard to keep the American citizens and people safe. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back, and I remind if you don't get to questions that you want to ask, you can submit them for the record. So we can do that at the end. I now recognize the gentleman From Puerto Rico, Mr. Hernandez for 5 minutes of questions.
I have some matters of interest regarding immigration and FEMA, but before that, Mr. Kent, does the Bible say anything about freedom of speech?
Not a biblical scholar.
I don't think it does, and I'm concerned about singling out Muslims and specific religions to talk about how their religious dogma conflicts with our laws and constitutions. I lament that Ms. Noem has had to leave early today, but I wanted to talk about the atrocities that the DHS's immigration enforcement and the pain it is causing in places like my home district of Puerto Rico. Just a few weeks ago, we witnessed ICE shove a pregnant woman. I cannot imagine, as an expecting father myself, the anxiety that that family must have gone through when they took that person to the hospital and treated her for her injuries. Also, a few weeks ago, CBP detained Aracelis Terrero from the streets of Cabo Rojo. They put her on she was in a detention facility. She was removed from the detainee location service, and she was not allowed to contact her attorney. Ms. Terrero was a domestic violence victim who was in Puerto Rico with a legal work permit. And I wanted to ask Ms. Noem if DHS policies allow CBP agents to detain persons who are legally in the United States. I wanted to ask Ms. Noem the legal authority behind the detention of Aracelis Terrero. I wanted to ask Ms. Noem why she was removed from the detainee location system. I wanted to ask Ms. Noem why Aracelis Terrero was not allowed to contact her attorney. Unfortunately, I predict that she would not have given us adequate answers based on the answers that she has provided to my colleagues here today. Now, I also wanted to raise a concern with Ms. Noem regarding TSA agents. In Puerto Rico, I witnessed how many TSA agents worked arduously without pay during the government shutdown, and how her announcement that they would get $10,000 as a bonus for working without pay during the pandemic actually created the opposite effect of boosting morale, because it was so selective that it excluded, apparently, most workers. And finally, I wanted to raise the concerns of red and blue mayors from Puerto Rico. I emphasize red and blue mayors, Republican and Democratic mayors, regarding her recent secret policy regarding transactions or grants for FEMA money that exceed $100,000. So to their surprise, they found out that grants and funding assignments exceeding $100,000 would now need to be approved by Secretary Noem. But there was no transparency regarding that rule. And we have no information regarding the application and the enforcement of that rule. And I sent her a letter with 15 other members asking those questions, and I got a letter in response that has no answers to these questions. And I wanted to urge her to reconsider this policy that is delaying aid and reconstruction funds for the people of Puerto Rico, which are still suffering 9 years after Hurricane Maria, and that this is affecting Republicans and Democrats, that reconstruction should not have a party ID, and that instead of fighting the bureaucracy, this has made the bureaucracy worse. But unfortunately, Secretary Noem left early, and we are left expecting these answers. Thank you, and with that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. I now recognize the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Ogles, for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses. Let's be clear. The United States of America is safer today because of President Trump. The United States of America is the dominant predator across all landscapes because of President Trump. We have restored our status as the global leader because of President Trump. Hard stop. Now, when we look at the topic of the hearings, the objectives, there were 6 bullet points. I'm going to hit the highlights, examine the full scope of evolving threats facing the United States of America, particularly on readiness at the federal, local, and state level. Highlight the significant, number 2, the significant national security gains achieved by President Donald Trump. 3, review the Trump administration's efforts to reverse the damage caused by the Biden border crisis. 4, analyze the scale and scope of cyber threats which is my area as the chairman of the Cyber Subcommittee. 5, discuss the evolving terrorism landscape, including FTOs, HVEs, and DVEs. And 6, evaluate emerging unconventional threats. Unfortunately, my colleagues must not have read the memo, because that's not what they've talked about. They want to talk about ICE and immigration. So let's talk about that. You know, in 1965, we passed the Hart-Celler Act. Since that time, we've seen chain migration on a scale that, quite frankly, I'm not sure even the progressive liberal authors of that bill could have possibly imagined. In that amount of time, we've seen 60 million migrants come into this country, most of which, 90%, from third world countries. There are roughly 300,000 Afghans in America, 200,000 of which came under Biden. Approximately 45% of Afghans are on U.S. food stamps. Afghans under the Biden administration have an unemployment rate double that of Americans. 68% of Afghans are on Medicaid. Let's go overseas. And so if that sounds like political rhetoric, let's look at the facts. Paris, 48% of crimes committed by foreigners, most of which were Muslim. Overall crime has surged since the Islamic migrant influx. That is from the French Interior Ministry. London, 40% of sex crimes are committed by foreigners, most of which are Muslims. That's the Metropolitan Police Department. Rome, 83% of 2024 street robberies by non-EU citizens, almost all of which were Muslim. Sexual assaults, 69% Muslim, Italian police reports. Minneapolis, here in the homeland. Violent crime in Cedar Riverside, a Somali hub, rose 56%, 2010 to 2018. Dearborn, Michigan, crime 105% above the national average. Hamtramck, outside of Detroit, 92% of assaults by Muslim immigrants. Drug arrests, 85% Muslim immigrants. Now let's go to Nashville, Tennessee, where a Somali man, a migrant who came in 2015, raped to death a woman on the steps of a church. I've had enough. I've said it once, and I'll say it again. Deport them all. This is our country. We get to decide who comes in, and we get to decide who has to leave. And I say, deport them all. 90% that have come into this country are from third world countries, most of which are sucking resources from American citizens, burdening our cities. They do not belong here. Mr. Kent, I'm chairman of the Cyber Subcommittee. Let's go into the scope and scale of the cyber threats posed by the CCP. I give you the floor, sir.
CCP is probably one of the more aggressive actors in the cyberspace right now. NCTC is mostly focused on the terrorism realm and how terrorist actors are using the proliferation of encrypted devices and just the internet to spread propaganda. That's probably our biggest purview in terms of cyber.
Mr. Glasheen?
Chairman, I would say that the Chinese government, the CCP, is our greatest cyber threat. It is a full-time job, and the resources they throw at this is unbelievable. It's a major concern.
You know, I want to thank the witnesses for being here, and I want to thank President Trump. You know, as I sit in the SCIF and I'm reading the briefings from the CIA and the FBI on the daily attacks to our country and to our infrastructure, I appreciate the president, and I appreciate you gentlemen and your service to this country in keeping Americans safe. They have no idea what you do every single day. God bless you, and God bless America. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize the gentlelady from New Jersey, Ms. Poe, for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to our ranking member. Yes, indeed, we've spoken a great deal and learned many things here today, some of which are still going unanswered, many questions that all of us still have. And there are a vast number of threats that endanger our homeland, from increasingly sophisticated state-sponsored terrorist networks to evolving technologies. Our law enforcement agencies are engaging criminals on multiple fronts and facing significant demands every single day. Next year, there will be an increasingly heightened threat environment in my district in northern New Jersey as we host the World Cup. Federal counterterrorism grant funding is absolutely critical in keeping our communities safe against the evolving threat environment. This is why I have been so deeply disturbed by the decision of Secretary Noem to freeze, delay, and cut billions of dollars in federal counterterrorism grant funds. In February, her department, DHS, froze billions of dollars in counterterrorism grants that had already been awarded to states and cities. This decision left state and local public safety organizations unable to access critical funding. DHS then ignored legal deadlines for releasing this year's installment of the $1.5 billion for these counterterrorism programs. And when DHS finally released this funding, she abruptly and illegally slashed funding to states with Democratic governors like New Jersey. States and localities have sued in federal court for funding owed by the federal government that was appropriated for them by Congress. In October, I sent a letter to Secretary Noem, and if she was here, I would be saying this directly to her, signed by all of my Democratic colleagues in New Jersey's delegation, demanding that she stop playing politics with federal counterterrorism funding and immediately restore New Jersey's allocation. Specifically, I'm referring to the 50% cut to New Jersey's allocation of the Homeland Security Grant Program, which includes the Urban Area Security Initiative and the State Homeland Security Program. This is the single largest preparation grant program in the Federal Emergency Management Agency. New Jersey has relied on these federal grants to respond and prepared against terrorist attack. When she published the notice of funding opportunities for the Homeland Security Grant Program, she stated that her intent to allocate this funding was going to be based on statutory risk assessment and an analysis of relative risk to terrorism faced by the 100 most populous areas in the country. Under this process, New Jersey was preliminarily allocated around $19 million, but DHS final award notification, our state received just $9 million. The final award notification failed to explain why such drastic cuts were made. Instead, she simply stated that it was done, quote, per DHS directive. To this day, we have still not received, I have not received a response to my letter. And I absolutely cannot understand and am so incredibly disappointed by the fact that this administration continues to try and attempt to walk all over this body. Congress is Article 1 branch, and we demand that we've received the respect that is due and that she respond to the questions, and that is her responsibility and her job. Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Thank you.
Gentlelady yields back. I now recognize the gentlelady from South Carolina, Ms. Biggs, for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. I know you have a really difficult job. I want to take a moment just to highlight the fantastic work of the Homeland Security Advisory Council. I think when I say this, I speak on behalf of our entire South Carolina delegation when I say that I'm pleased to see South Carolina's own Governor Henry McMaster appointed to chair the HSAC. Since its inception in 2002, the Council's mission has been to offer the department real-time advice across the whole spectrum of security issues And I think this is especially critical for a state like mine in South Carolina, where we face everything from severe weather events such as Hurricane Helene to major port security and cyber security concerns. But I'll move on, and I would like to direct this statement to Director Kent. China is and has been for quite some time the primary great power competitor to the U.S. I think some of my colleagues have already established that today. And I think we've identified the pacing challenge for our national security strategies. Chinese companies have made land acquisitions near sensitive military sites in the U.S., and Chinese researchers have engaged in espionage and intellectual property theft. Chinese national encounters at our northern and southern borders surged in fiscal year 24, and China remains the primary supplier of precursor chemicals contributing to American overdose deaths. So my question, Director, is to what extent do you see a nexus between China's destabilizing activities and the terror threat landscape in the United States?
Thank you for that question, and that's a very important topic, especially in terms of fentanyl and the precursors the Chinese Communist Party provides. Working directly with the cartels, we have agents of the Chinese Communist Party, some directly affiliated and some indirectly affiliated, that are working with the cartels to continue to change essentially the recipe of the fentanyl, because as we designate these different precursors and they kind of fall off the market or become more regulated, these advanced chemists will then come into play, and they're the ones that provide the new ingredients, the new ways to manufacture fentanyl that kills American citizens. So this is something that we're looking at, in particular the relationship between these Chinese actors and the Mexican drug cartels.
Well, thank you so much. And sir, if you have any additional information, I'd be happy to hear.
Yes, ma'am. Thanks for the opportunity. I think to your question is, if our country's destabilized, it creates a lot of vulnerabilities for us. And whether it be the fentanyl is what you're talking about here, it could definitely affect our national security. Regarding the fentanyl, one thing Director Patel recently did is we've recognized the challenge that fentanyl faces in the United States. And instead of continuing to address the symptom, look at the root of the problem. He recently went over to China, met with his counterparts in MSP, and they agreed to put 13 precursor chemicals on an export control list. And if we can prevent the chemicals and the precursors coming to the United States or into the, Mexico or anyone that puts together the fentanyl that comes into the United States, that can have a greater effect to reduce that threat to the United States.
Well, thank you so much, and I appreciate you being here and hope you realize how important your work is. And I know the district, my 3rd district of South Carolina, is counting on you to continue that hard work. I yield back, sir.
Gentlelady yields back. I now recognize the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Walkinshaw, for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I regret that Secretary Noem tapped out after 2 hours, but nonetheless, I want to focus on an issue that I think is really important: the misuse of taxpayer funds and the steering of DHS funds to politically connected firms tied to the Secretary's office, while hiding that activity from the American people. Secretary Noem has been criticized by members of her own party and by the Trump administration for being slow and ineffective when Americans actually need her help. Republican Senator Tom Tillis said she was, quote, slow off the mark in getting disaster aid out the door. A senior administration official recently told Politico that there was, quote, some fishy stuff going on with money at DHS. And the veto authority she handed to Corey Lewandowski over contracts and grants has delayed life-saving resources after disasters. So when it comes to helping disaster victims, she's been slow and ineffective. But when it came to spending money on her own image and then funneling that money to her friends and her political allies, She moved with remarkable speed. According to reporting by ProPublica, DHS obligated $220 million for an advertising campaign featuring her in staged, phony border imagery and featuring pictures of President Trump's private properties. That money, that taxpayer money, was routed through a newly created and secretive Delaware shell company. It was then secretly funneled from that shell company to a firm with direct political and personal ties to her office and her political operation. That firm is called the Strategy Group. This situation has all of the elements of political corruption. First, she invoked emergency authority to bypass competitive bidding. Second, she concealed the true destination of the money by routing it through a shell company, a red flag in any corruption investigation. Third, the firm that actually did the work, that filmed her attempting to herd cattle, has documented political and personal ties to the secretary and her senior leadership. Fourth, her directive requiring personal approval of all contracts over $100,000 concentrated power in the hands of the very people tied to the firm that secretly received the work, her and Mr. Lewandowski. At the exact time this contract was executed, DHS was diverting investigators and resources away from child exploitation, away from child trafficking, away from illegal gun smuggling, yet somehow she found nearly $250 million to promote herself, and the money flowed to her political allies. A federal contracting law expert, quoted in ProPublica, summarized it plainly. It's corrupt is the word. That's what I would have liked to ask the secretary about today. I would have asked if she personally approved the money that flowed to her political and personal allies. I would have asked if whether when she was governor of South Dakota in 2023 and the same firm got $8.5 million of taxpayer money, whether she steered the money to them. Because an official in her administration said she did. That's what I would have asked her. But she had to leave early. Mr. Glasheen, are you familiar with the Proud Boys?
I'm familiar with the name, yeah, Proud Boys.
Okay. Does the FBI still designate the Proud Boys as an extremist organization? They did in 2018 in President Trump's first term.
We are in the process right now of changing our categories for domestic terrorists.
So they're no longer designated as an extremist organization. The FBI designated them an extremist organization in 2018. Has that changed?
I'm not aware that they did that.
It's all over the media, sir. It's widely reported. Can you get back to me on that?
Sure will.
All right, thank you.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize gentleman from North Carolina who's not for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I go into my line of questioning, it's worth notice that the previous administration labeled Catholic churches and charities as domestic terrorists, and there was no outrage about that from the other side of the aisle. But regards to today's hearing, threats that currently face the country, we have millions of people in this country right now who will harm the country either with specific intent or by natural effect. There's a refusal to assimilate. There's a disdain for Western values. There's even a disdain for this country. We've seen it recently in the unfortunate but staggering case that we've become aware of in Minnesota. Somalian groups who have come here to defraud the United States to the tune of billions of dollars, submitting fake invoices, at least motivated in part for personal enrichment, and then to fund terrorist groups back home, our adversaries. And one of the points that I find most disgraceful from the other side of the aisle, they would rather talk about Secretary Noem rather than these threats that we are trying to combat. And they also say that this is strictly a race issue. That's a disgusting accusation. From my experience in law enforcement, there were people from all over the world who exploited the open border policies or weak legal immigration policies to come here, whether they were from Eastern Europe, China, Russia, the Middle East, Northern Africa, Pacific Islands, and of course, South America. It's a full world problem that is operating inside of our borders. So, Mr. Kent, let me just start with you. How can we programmatically identify, again, these threats that arrive at the point of millions of people who are here, specifically harming the country?
So right now we're in the triage phase. We've already identified 18,000 individuals who have ties to known suspected terrorists and terrorist organizations. So we're starting with them, working with DHS and the FBI to locate and deport them. But as you pointed out, it is a much bigger problem. We've had 2 to 2.7 million folks from Muslim countries, Muslim regions that have come into the country under Biden with minimum to no vetting.
Well, I asked you the question, how do you vet someone that doesn't come from a functioning country?
Exactly. You simply can't. That's why prior to the Biden administration, these individuals, even ones who wanted to claim asylum, they had to go to the first safe third country. And it would take 18 months to 2 years to properly vet them. Biden threw all of that out the window.
We were assured by Secretary Noem's predecessor that every Afghani refugee who came in under the asylum program was thoroughly vetted. Was that true?
That was a lie. Any of those individuals who were vetted, such as the terrorists in D.C., they were vetted under a war zone standard to see if they could serve as a soldier or as a guard or a cook or something like that, to see if they posed a threat to us tactically in Afghanistan or Iraq, but not to be our neighbors. Two completely different systems of vetting. The Biden administration used the tactical vetting as a ruse to get millions of people into.
And then once they were here, we have eyewitness testimony that they were deployed to military bases and then picked up by people who were already in the country, never to be seen again. Is that consistent with what you've seen in your current position?
Absolutely. We're having a hard time running down where a lot of these individuals are. That's why we haven't been able to locate and deport all of them rapidly.
What tools can we assist you with in identifying these self-radicalizing circles who are inside the country currently? One thing that I want to be sure that the people who are watching this know is that the shooter who committed the act of terrorism against the 2 National Guard members, he was radicalized here.
Yeah.
How are we going to identify, again, the people who are inside of our own borders, empowering our enemies to commit harm inside this country?
Right now, the Trump administration has essentially gone back to letting us enforce laws, letting us enforce immigration standards, and letting us vet people. What I would like to emphasize to this committee and to the American people is that we simply cannot go back and retroactively vet these millions of folks that came in under Joe Biden. We have to locate them, and we have to deport them as soon as we possibly can. Those who want to reapply, they can have the opportunity to reapply. So in terms of what we need, we just need the longitude to do our jobs. We're getting that from the Trump administration, and we appreciate the support of this committee.
Yep. Mr. Glasheen, I want to give you a time to answer. In terms of the types of domestic terror that we currently face inside of our own borders, can you briefly describe that with the remaining minute that I have?
Yeah, and thanks for the opportunity. I want to make very clear, I know the question came up earlier about designating the Proud Boys. The FBI doesn't designate domestic terror groups. We don't do that.
That wasn't a serious line of questions.
We investigate people.
Yes.
And the common component there is violence. So I want to make that very clear. And so in terms of regarding the domestic terrorism threat, we have over 1,700 domestic terrorism investigations in the U.S. And with respect to Antifa, which was asked earlier, we have approximately 70 Antifa investigations. Our arrests with Antifa-related subjects are up 171% this year.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you.
I now recognize gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Carter. 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, witnesses, for being here. I represent the New Orleans region where we welcome partnership. We do not welcome occupation. What we're seeing unfold in our community is not public safety. It's a political stunt wrapped in badges, armored vehicles, and military uniforms. ICE and Border Patrol agents have descended into our community with no transparency and no meaningful coordination with local officials. The militarized forces who are not trained in our local laws, not trained in community-based de-escalation, and do not know our neighborhoods or our people. This is a recipe for disaster, confusion, and dangerous mistakes. Our communities are not a stage for political theater. If this administration wants to partner, then act like it. Share the plan, respect local law, and work with us, not around us. Unfortunately, Kristi Noem, our secretary, had to leave in the middle of a very important conversation to go and talk about dismantling FEMA, a discussion we'll have at another time that for the life of me, I simply can't understand why we would want to decentralize the Federal Emergency Management Agency, an agency that is needed more now than it was needed when it was first created, as natural disasters continue to happen more often than ever before in places it's never happened before. But nonetheless, if she were here, but she's not, I'll ask her chair. Secretary Noem, I recently stood with local elected leaders from the city of New Orleans and our mayor-elect, Helena Moreno, as they urged DHS agents to commit to transparency, due process protections, identifiable federal agents, safeguards against discriminatory enforcement, and humanitarian protections. I would ask her if she were here, but she isn't. Ma'am, will you commit your department to uphold these values during the current operation in Louisiana? Apparently they aren't doing that, but because I know both of you are capable of answering this question and are in fact civil servants that have demonstrated in your career that you do understand transparency, that you do understand the Constitution. So I'll ask you the question, do you think this request from our mayor-elect in New Orleans is a reasonable one? Is it reasonable to ask that agents commit to transparency, due process protections, identifiable agents, and safeguards against discriminatory enforcements? Yes or no? Do you think that's a reasonable ask? Yes or no? Is that reasonable?
Sounds reasonable, yeah.
Thank you. Do you think it's reasonable, sir?
Sounds reasonable.
Thank you. Secretary Noem, the masked officers you sent into the streets of New Orleans are attempting to arrest and abduct and detain anyone that looks like a migrant. I got to ask the question, what does a migrant look like? Do you know what a migrant looks like, sir? Yes? Can you define what a migrant looks like to you?
I cannot.
Thank you. Can you tell me what you think a migrant looks like?
These are targeted raids.
Can you tell me what they look like?
Yeah, you have to stop them, you have to check their identification.
Okay, but can you tell me, if you were describing to me as a new $50,000 bonused ICE agent, what does a migrant look like?
You would stop and you would ask them for ID, and you'd be on an intelligence-driven operation, which is what these ICE raids are. They're intelligence-driven operations.
But if you were to say a guy's wearing a red shirt, you would say the guy's wearing a red shirt and a purple baseball hat. You would be able to give that description. But can you give a description of what a migrant looks like? Can you give a description of what a migrant looks like?
We need to deploy ICE officers to stop people and ask them, and they go on intelligence.
I reclaim my time. You clearly don't want to answer my question, and that's unfortunate because the American people want to know these answers. We want to know. I've got a quick video I want to show before my time runs. Please.
Look at this. This is a stunning video from Louisiana. You hear that woman cry out. She's a 23-year-old running down the street away from the masked agents who are chasing her, repeating that she is a U.S.-born citizen, saying,
Stop. This is a United States citizen who's running away from ICE agents who, when she gets to her house and her husband comes out, they stop the chase. They clearly weren't chasing her for that. They appear to have been doing something nefarious. You know why we can't tell the difference? Because they wear masks and they don't identify themselves as agents. That's a problem, Mr.
Gentleman's time's expired. I recognize the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Van Epps, for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the Secretary and gentlemen. Thank you for being here today at this critical hearing. I'm honored to be here at my very first hearing as the newest member of Congress. And I've had the privilege to serve this country for over 20 years in uniform, first as an active duty U.S. Army helicopter pilot with service with the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, and currently serving in the Tennessee Army National Guard. And I'm honored to continue the mission from a new post with this distinguished committee. To our witnesses today, allow me to begin by expressing my appreciation for the work you all do, for the work your teams do, the work that President Trump and this administration does to ensure the safety and security of our great nation. I have just a couple of questions focused on emerging AI-enabled threats. Adversaries are already using AI to identify exploitable vulnerabilities within systems and networks and generate cyber intrusion plans far faster than traditional cyber tools. Mr. Glasheen, sir, foreign cyber actors are increasingly using AI to refine malware, automate phishing, and sift large volumes of stolen data. What additional cooperation or coordination between the FBI, DHS, and companies within the private sector would most improve early detection of AI-enabled intrusions? Or if you would just like to comment on this matter generally.
No, I appreciate that opportunity. AI is a continued challenge right now. I think the relationships we have right now with government, private industry are strong right now with respect to any type of malware, ransomware. I think the CISA 2015 authorization that gives us the authorities, that's critical for the future success of that. And I think for the ongoing partnerships, I mean, the key piece here is that relationship with private sector, private industry. So we just continue to reinforce that.
Thank you, sir. Director Kent, anything further you'd like to add on that from?
No, AI is something we're closely monitoring. I mean, the ability for terrorists to breach language barriers and also to inspire people to conduct attacks and then give them AI-specific instructions, something we're monitoring carefully and very concerned about.
Thank you, sir. Thank you both. I know you both spent your entire careers defending this country and greatly appreciate that, your service and sacrifice. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Will the gentleman yield? Mr. Van Epps, can I have your time?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Kent, I want to talk to you a little bit about what we just had with Mr. Carter. I want to let you finish the answer about what an immigrant looks like, going back to my question, that there really is a wide variety of illegal immigration that has attacked this country.
Just the gentleman yield to the gentleman?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this is the correct time that the gentleman had left?
Yes.
Okay, the gentleman's recognized for the remainder of
Thank you.
time.
If you wanted to finish your answer, I'd be happy to yield you the time.
Thank you.
He answered it. He said he didn't know.
We've had 15 to 20 million illegals come into this country since Joe Biden took office. And so we have to stop individuals and we have to ask them for identification to determine if they are here legally. That's what you're seeing in those ICE raids.
And in regards to the toll that illegal immigration has taken on this country, are you aware, sir, that in the last 25 years, more Americans have died because of drug overdoses than the entire country's military combat history?
Yes.
250 years of military casualties is about 10% less than the overall deaths of the last 25 years of drug overdoses. Are you aware of that?
I'm aware of that, and that's why I was glad to see President Trump designate the cartels that bring that poison into the country and kill hundreds of thousands of Americans, designate them as terrorists so we could stop them and aggressively target them.
Does fentanyl discriminate on race?
It does not.
Or does it affect every single person, every single community, every single neighborhood that it enters?
Every single person, yes, absolutely.
I find it quite alarming that we do not have even a minuscule percentage of the outrage that we have seen from the other side of the aisle as it relates to the plight that Americans have undergone because of illegal immigration and its harms than we do today when you all are trying to enforce the law. From our side of the aisle, again, I thank you. I hope you'll come back. This is a worthwhile conversation. It's a needed conversation. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back to Mr. Van Epps. Mr. Van Epps, do you yield?
Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Gentleman yields. I now recognize gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Evans, for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the ranking member, of course, for this important conversation today. Thank you for the witnesses for taking your time to come and speak to us about these things. And first, I just want to commend everyone that's working in the Department of Homeland Security, in law enforcement and border security for all of the work that you've done to keep our country safe, keep our states safe, keep our communities safe. I spent 10 years as a police officer in the Denver metro area. I was in the U.S. Army and the Colorado Army National Guard for 12 years to include a combat deployment overseas to the Middle East as part of the global war on terror. And those experiences, coupled with what's happening in Colorado, have shown me how critically important this hearing is on global threats and things that are happening around the country and around the world, because we know the numbers. We know that every 15 days under the previous administration, more Americans lost their lives due to drugs, with most of that being fentanyl, than were killed in the entirety of the September 11th terrorist attacks. Somewhere around 400,000 Americans died under the previous administration as a result of the poison that's coming into our communities from these cartels, these organized criminals, these foreign terrorist organizations, and again, killing more people than Al-Qaeda could have ever dreamed of killing on American soil. And I saw it as a cop, I saw it as a soldier, and so I'm incredibly thankful for all of the work that's been done to secure our border and to crush these cartels, these criminals, these terrorist organizations. And somehow it sounds like there's been a lot of conversations and a lot of posters about names of folks from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. As cops, we all know this, we have what we call in cop slang the Book of the Dead, all of the bad things that you see as a cop. And so I don't have a poster up here because I don't want to traumatize the public with the things that I had to see and that my brothers and sisters had to see during my 10 years in law enforcement. But it's the names and faces of some of those 400,000 Americans who died as a result of this poison coming into our community, peddled by cartels and drug dealers and traffickers. And it's names. One of my constituents that was with me here on Capitol Hill earlier this year, Liz Hardy, lost a daughter, Brooke Hardy, to fentanyl. And so I'm going to say those names. And I'm going to remind folks that there are 400,000 other names out there of people who were killed by terrorists peddling this poison in our community. In Colorado, since 2020, Colorado has lost over 7,000 lives. At times, Colorado has had the second highest overdose rate of teenagers in the country. And so I am absolutely thrilled that we've been able to work together to secure the border and to go target these worst of the worst individuals here. And so to Director Kent, can you just talk about how cartels are adapting their drug and human trafficking methods in response to the new border security and the new focus and emphasis on getting these people out of our community? And what sort of resources do you need from Congress to continue disrupting? We all know action, reaction. We do something to keep Americans safe. The cartels react to that. What sort of things do you need from Congress so that we can continue to stay one step ahead and not have another 400,000 dead Americans?
It's a great question. Because President Trump and Secretary Noem decisively secured the border, a lot of the fentanyl smuggling and drug smuggling is moving to the maritime environment on both coasts, whether that's in the Gulf of America, the Caribbean, or in the Pacific. So we're going to need a good deal more ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance platforms to cover that big and broad space so we can pick up these drug boats and take them off the battlefield.
Thank you so much for that. So in addition to being a cop and a soldier for a combined 22 years, I am the only Latino from the Colorado delegation here in Washington, D.C., my district, 40% Hispanic. And so I am a little bit disappointed that the secretary left early because I wanted to make it clear that my Hispanic community also support drug dealers, these criminals, out of our community because the Hispanic community suffers as well. But I also wanted to talk about, as we used to say in the military and law enforcement, you got to play the hand you're dealt, not the hand you wish you had. And the hand we're dealt right now is somewhere between 35 and 42% of the agriculture workforce in the United States are folks who are not here legally. And so as we're having this conversation around border security and deportations, I just wanted to have a little bit further exploration around how do we make sure that we protect our national security, because we know that national security starts with food security. If we can't eat, we can't do any of the other things that we're talking about here today. And so continuing that conversation around how we strike that appropriate balance to make sure that we are supporting our farmers and so many other industries with some of those numbers that I've mentioned. So I can see that my time has expired. Yield back to the chairman.
Gentleman yields back, and I appreciate the members for being here. I now want to entertain any of those unanimous consents. The gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you. I ask unanimous consent to include into the record an article by ProPublica from October 16, 2025, entitled, "We found that more than 170 U.S. citizens have been held by immigration agents. They've been kicked, dragged, and detained for days." I'd also like to add an article by NBC News from December 7, 2025, entitled ICE has arrested nearly 75,000 people with no criminal records, data shows, and the letter that I sent on October 3rd requesting a meeting with Secretary Noem.
Without objection.
Can I do one more? I'd also ask for unanimous consent to enter into the record an article from USA Today, December 2nd, titled Trump Pardons Cocaine Kingpin Who Ruled Honduras.
Without objection.
Thank you. And last one, I'd like unanimous consent to be entered into the record, a letter dated today, December 11th, after the conversation with the Secretary, with dates of availability in order to be able to meet with Secretary Noem.
Without objection.
Thank you.
Gentleman yields. Any other?
Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to enter record.
Gentleman's recognized.
You know, we've heard over and over again that Border Patrol would only target those people that were, in fact, dangerous criminals. We've seen since the time in New Orleans that less than 1/3 of those have been detained have been criminals. I'd like to submit in the record this article by the AP, which demonstrates the statistics that clearly show that these agents aren't, in fact, going after hardened criminals, but people who look a certain way. Mr. Chairman, I have one other item that I'd like to also show over and over again. DHS will be targeting dangerous criminals. And here's a second article that demonstrates, in fact, that the people that they're picking up, many of which are, in fact, U.S. citizens because they look a certain way. The central theme that I'm offering in these unanimous consent articles is you cannot singularly identify a place or person of origin by the way they look. Our Constitution protects us from that. This is a gross injustice.
Without objection. Gentleman yields.
Closing.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, this secretary abandoned her duty to testify at this committee hearing, and refusing to answer our question is unprecedented. No other secretary, even those under threat of impeachment, have just gotten up and walked out of a hearing when nearly half the members haven't even asked questions. On one level, you can't be surprised because she's failed to answer our letters and other requests for information. Secretary Noem did not even want to appear at all today. To add insult to injury, I'm told that when she left, she did not leave the building. She went to the anteroom. Furthermore, to ostensibly go to a FEMA council meeting for 1 o'clock. I understand on good information that the FEMA council meeting was canceled. So there was no need for her to go. She's a liar with no respect for congressional oversight. She joined FBI Director Kash Patel in telling the U.S. House Committee on Homeland Security to pound sand by getting up and walking out in the middle of the hearing. We were told that she'd be here until 1 o'clock, but she left significantly early. This is embarrassing display from someone who can't take the heat, is disrespectful to the committee and the Constitution, the separation of powers. But again, what else can we expect from an administration led by a man who sicked a mob on the Capitol on January 6th? Mr. Chairman, because the secretary walked out of the hearing, I move that this committee subpoena Secretary Noem back to continue her testimony.
Thank the gentleman.
I yield back.
The gentleman yields back.
Mr. Chairman, I move to table the motion.
Gentleman moves the table motion. I thank the gentleman for that motion. No, continue. The hearing has ended. We will entertain the motion. I would like to excuse the witnesses and thank them so they don't have to wait around for the vote. First, also thank the Capitol Police for being here today and doing a great job, and thank the witnesses for being here today. The hearing is on worldwide threats. I'm sorry we didn't get to focus a lot on that today. As someone who's from New York, and 25th anniversary 9/11 is coming up, I thank you all for the work you're doing to keep us safe and make sure another 9/11 does not happen. The members of the committee may have some additional, okay, we'll do it at the end, all right. The witnesses are excused. And on the motion to table, all those in favor say aye. 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 All those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
The ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I guess we're going to have to ask for a recorded vote on that.
A recorded vote has been requested. The clerk will prepare the roll.
Mr. Chairman, can I just have a point of personal privilege to ask you a question? It's an easy one. It's a statement. It's a point of personal privilege. Yeah, I do. I'll be very brief. And this is bipartisan. I promise you. I think
Gentleman's recognized.
the fact that the secretary left prematurely is not only a disrespect to you as chair, but to the entire body. I think the fact that this secretary, at your request, and the hurdles you had to go through to get her here, to leave prematurely for a meeting that was canceled, that really did not hold the weight that she suggested because it never happened. Somebody turned me off. I apologize to you, my friend. You deserve better.
Thank you, gentlemen. Yield back.